I understand that. But other than waiting, there's nothing we can do given the current situation. Sovereign Chen Yong replied helplessly, as he pushed an incoming ancient sage away, with a powerful thrust of his two palms. He wanted to kill that fellow as well. But once the ritual had started, there was no stopping it. Otherwise, that would be viewed as an act of undermining the god, and it could incur the rage of the divinity. With their strength combined, they might still stand a chance against the recovered sovereign Chunling. However, against a god, the only possible fate that lay before them was death. All we can do for now is kill all of these ancient sages or render them powerless. That way, even if sovereign Chunling does make a full recovery, he will be completely alone. We will stand a greater chance at victory then, Sovereign Chunyong said. I understand. Zhang Xian nodded. Indeed, this was the best that they could do at the moment. As long as Sovereign Chunling did not achieve a breakthrough from the blood reincarnation realm after the ritual, with the combined prowess of he, Ancient Sage Allfire, Ancient Sage Emoling, and the Dragonbone Divine Spear, they might still stand a good chance at victory. Hula. While the two of them were chatting, an otherworldly demon ancient sage charged toward Zhang Xian. The weapon that this ancient sage wielded was a for visiting. Seeing that his strategy worked, the otherworldly demon ancient sage raised the judge's pen in his hand and flicked it once more. Guild leader. Seeing that Zhang Xian was in a terrible position, ancient sage Emoling attempted to rush over to offer his support. However, the next instant, attacks suddenly rained down on him one after another, pinning him firmly in place. It seemed like the ancient sage that he was facing had sensed his intentions to back up his comrade. So the other party had decisively launched a series of powerful attacks to hold him down. The same was happening to Sovereign Chunyong and the others. They had all seen how Zhang Xian had managed to kill their comrade with the spear in his hand, and they knew how frightening an opponent he was. Thus, they had decided to coordinate with one another to end his life. Knowing his allies would not be able to hold Sovereign Chunyong and the others down for too long, the ancient sage sneered coldly as he raised his palm to crush Zhang Xian's skull. This was a strike that harnessed the strength to utterly crush one's body and soul. Even if Zhang Xian had assimilated the blood of a blood reincarnation realm ancient sage, there was little hope that he would survive the blow. Young master. Guild leader. Master. The three ancient sages narrowed their eyes in horror. They wanted to charge forward to save him, but they found themselves utterly helpless in the situation. Just as they thought that Zhang Xian would really meet his end, a smile suddenly crept onto the lips of the young man, following which, the spear in his grasp suddenly surged forward. Puha! Before anyone could process what was going on, the ancient sage's heart had already been impaled by the Dragonbone Divine Spear. The devastating might that he had gathered in his palm dissipated, without causing the slightest damage. Hula! Fresh blood spluttered here and there. Whipping out the jade bottles in his storage ring, Zhang Xian hurriedly collected whatever blood was scattered around. Everyone was stunned. Even the otherworldly demon tasked with stopping Zhang Xian was dumbstruck. It was through the Dragonbone Divine Spear that the great sage young man wielded the strength to stand against blood reincarnation realm experts like them. Under normal circumstances, he should have been a goner for allowing a blood reincarnation realm expert to get into such close proximity to him. Yet, how did the spear end up piercing through the other party's body? Was the earlier vertigo feigned? That was a close one. Meanwhile, Zhang Xian heaved a sigh of relief as he quickly harvested the fresh blood of the slain ancient sage. He had truly been caught off guard by the other party's soul attack, but due to the Stone of Divine Crusade that he had obtained from the Temple of Confucius, he had managed to recover swiftly. He had bestowed the Seal of Souls to Lu Chong, but he had chosen to keep the Stone of Divine Crusade with him. The Stone of Divine Crusade had the ability to devour souls and transform them into pure soul energy to nourish one's soul. Typically speaking, given the prowess of the ancient sage's soul attack, he would indeed have been unable to recover in time. However, through absorbing the soul energy using the Stone of Divine Crusade, he had been able to swiftly calm his jolted soul. After killing the ancient sage and harvesting his blood, Zhang Xian took the judge's pen and threw it into his storage ring, before whipping out the Stone of Divine Crusade with a flick of his wrist. Even without the Stone of Divine Crusade, he would have been fine, as he still had Vicious serving as his final trump card. Nevertheless, it was still best for him to retain Vicious till he was truly needed. Lowering his head to look at the Stone of Divine Crusade, he noticed that there was a slight difference with the artifact. It was emanating a faint blue light. Activating the Eye of Insight, Zhang Xian swiftly saw innumerable powerful auras drifting within the Stone of Divine Crusades. When he placed his palm on it, he immediately felt a surge of warmth flowing into his soul, as if he had stepped into a hot spring. This is concentrated soul energy. Zhang Xian narrowed his eyes. As a soul oracle, he could tell that what was harnessed within the Stone of Divine Crusade was pure soul energy. Through absorbing this soul energy, one would be able to nourish and enhance one's soul. He clearly remembered that there had been hardly anything left in the Stone of Divine Crusade the last time he had left it there. Why would there suddenly be such a huge amount of soul energy within it? Could it be? A thought suddenly surfaced in Zhang Xian's mind. He quickly took a closer look around the Stone of Divine Crusade, and he noticed many thin lines slowly gathering around it. The souls of the 100,000 saint cultivators that Sovereign Chunling sacrificed have all been devoured by the Stone of Divine Crusade. How could Zhang Xian still remain oblivious to what was going on after seeing that? Just like the Seal of Souls, the Stone of Divine Crusade had the ability to devour souls and refine them into concentrated soul energy. Such an ability was deemed abominable by orthodox cultivators, so it had been banned on the Master-Teacher continent. It was also partly due to this that soul oracles were deeply hated and feared by the populace. As a Master-Teacher, Zhang Xian would not resort to such a technique to raise his cultivation, but who could have known that after Sovereign Chunling killed so many of their tribesmen, their souls would inexplicably be consumed by the Stone of Divine Crusade? With so much soul energy, I should be able to push for a breakthrough to Ancient Sage. Zhang Xian thought in agitation. The idea of using the Stone of Divine Crusade to devour the souls of others was abominable to him. But what was done was done. It happened that he was in dire need of strength, and the concentrated soul energy within the Stone of Divine Crusade was what he needed. His soul cultivation had long reached sempiternal realm consummation, and with so much soul energy as sustenance, he could try pushing for a breakthrough to the level that countless dreamed of reaching. Let me give it a try. Taking in a deep breath, Zhang Xian instructed the Dragonbone Divine Spear and Vicious to protect his body, while he drew his soul out of his glabella. Tzizi. As soon as his soul came into contact with the Stone of Divine Crusade, the nourishing soul energy within the latter immediately poured into his soul. In an instant, his stagnated soul cultivation began surging forth. Something's wrong. I haven't obtained the soul cultivation technique required for me to achieve a breakthrough to Ancient Sage yet. Sensing his soul growing larger and larger, to the point that it seemed as if it would pop at any moment, Zhang Xian's lips twitched in horror. Too excited over the notion of a breakthrough, he had forgotten that the only Ancient Sage breakthrough methods that he knew of were for Jinqi cultivation. As for those relating to soul cultivation, he had not even read a single book at all. He had no idea what steps one had to take in order to achieve a breakthrough, and what one would experience in the process. Zhang Xian immediately turned to Ancient Sage Mo Ling and asked, Ancient Sage Mo Ling, do you have any manuals or insights relating to soul oracles achieving a breakthrough to Ancient Sage? Pass me everything you've got. It's one of the more unorthodox weapons. It's a hidden weapon shaped similar to a metal pen, thus the name. Manuals or insights relating to soul oracles achieving a breakthrough to Ancient Sage. Hearing those words, Ancient Sage Mo Ling nearly plummeted from the sky. Aren't you daring? Without referring to any insights or cultivation techniques, you actually attempted a breakthrough just like that. Do you think Ancient Sage is just like any cultivation stage, where you can easily achieve a breakthrough? Rendered speechless, Ancient Sage Mo Ling flicked his wrist, took out a pile of books, and flicked them in Zhang Xian's direction. Here, the soul oracles that had moved to the otherworldly battlefield retained their full heritage, and Ancient Sage Mo Ling himself was an Ancient Sage expert. Naturally, He had plenty of books relating to that topic. Zhang Xian formed a massive hand with his soul energy to grasp all of the books before scanning through them swiftly with his eyes. Endless streams of information flowed into his mind and became his own knowledge. But soon he shook his head. Those books did contain the experiences and breakthrough methods of past soul oracles, but they were not of much use to him. As one who was cultivating the Heaven's Path soul art, the path that he had taken was very different from that of the other soul oracles. If he attempted a breakthrough, using the conventional methods used by other soul oracles, his cultivation might go berserk. It looks like I can only depend on myself. Since the first soul oracle was able to find a way by himself to achieve a breakthrough to ancient sage, I should be able to pave a way out myself. Zhang Xian thought as he swiftly threw aside everything that he had read and went into a state of inner calm. Not everything required the experiences and wisdom of the predecessors to point out a way. Eventually, one had to learn to pave one's own way forward as well. The soul energy in the Stone of Divine Crusade poured into his soul like a rapid tide, nourishing it. However, too much of anything was a bad thing, and Zhang Xian's consciousness was starting to blur as a result of the overwhelming influx of energy. The souls of the 100,000 saint cultivators formed a congregation of energy so great that it even exceeded the might of blood reincarnation realm experts. Even though Zhang Xian's soul had been tempered by lightning and the Empyrean heavenly flame, he still found himself pushed to a corner. Slowly, hallucinations began appearing right before his eyes. While the Stone of Divine Crusade was able to wipe away the consciousness within souls and convert them into pure soul energy, it was unable to remove the aura of resentment that lingered within the souls. Those 100,000 saint cultivators had cultivated diligently for many years, but their lives came to an abrupt halt, just because Sovereign Chunling needed some tributes to heal his injuries. It was no wonder that each of those otherworldly demons was overflowing with indignation and resentment. One or two of these souls would not count for much, but when the resentment of over 100,000 souls was combined, the force produced was definitely something that one should stay away from. Clarity in the heart, emptiness in the mind. Under the influx of resentment, Zhang Xian felt as if his will was swiftly being corroded. All that was left of him was a hint of clarity that flowed in his consciousness, guarding everything that he stood for. Having been through the mountain of books and ocean of learning, he had browsed through countless books and assimilated much knowledge. As such, his soul was much denser than that of most 9-star master teachers, and even some of the ancient sages. Find authorized novels and web novel faster updates. Better experience, please click for visiting. His mind was slowly blurring out, but he was still able to firmly hold on to his core. Countless memories of slaughter and bloodshed flashed through his mind, and it felt as if he was living countless lives simultaneously. No matter how vivid the experiences were, he was still able to remember the fact that he was a master teacher. He could lose his life, but there were simply some principles and values that he had to guard at any cost. It was also the same for many experts on the master-teacher continent. Back then, after defeating Vicious, Kong Shi had possessed the power and means to destroy the entire otherworldly demonic tribe. However, he did not choose to do so. That was because eradicating an entire race was not something that he believed in. He persisted in his faith that enlightenment was the key to progress, and he sought to uphold that belief. Zhang Xian had his own beliefs that he was determined to uphold as well. However, unlike Kong Shi, he was not that much of an idealist. It was not to say that he could not relate to Kong Shi's vision, but even if he chose to pursue the same vision one day, it had to be built on the foundation that the safety of those whom he sought to protect was guaranteed. Thus, aside from investigating Luo Ruoxin's whereabouts, his main aim at the otherworldly battlefield was to resolve the threat of the otherworldly demonic tribe once and for all. Of course, he would prioritize peaceful means if he felt that they were feasible, but ultimately, he felt that it would be too dangerous for mankind if the otherworldly demonic tribe was left to do as it pleased. My spirit shall be indestructible, and my will shall live on for an eternity. No matter how far I go, I'll never forget my roots. This is the real me. Everything that Zhang Xian had experienced in the past year since he had arrived at the master-teacher continent flashed through his mind. Boom! The indestructible spirit born within him gradually seemed to warp into a golden droplet, which swiftly revolved around the accumulating soul energy. Soon enough, the golden droplet built up enough momentum to create a vortex around his soul, and it was growing larger and larger by the moment. Drip, drip. The vortex swiftly compressed the soul energy so tightly together that a liquid droplet was squeezed out of the vortex. A second droplet was soon produced, and a third one. It did not take long for droplets to accumulate and flow through his body, nourishing him. The liquefying of the soul. This is a mark of a breakthrough to ancient sage. Zhang Xian's eyes lit up. He knew that he was going to successfully achieve a breakthrough to ancient sage soon. Due to the intangible and formless nature of souls, it was usually impossible for those who were non-soul oracles and did not possess the eye of insight to see them unless one used their spiritual perception. However, the liquefying of Zhang Xian's soul meant that his soul was losing its intangible nature, taking on the form of a moving fluid. Of course, this was not liquefying in the truest sense. Rather, it meant that the purity of his soul energy had reached another level, resulting in a qualitative change in its nature. The liquid-like form of his soul energy would allow him to exert his might more effectively and powerfully. Faster, feeling his soul, which had been on the verge of exploding just a moment ago, calming down, he hastened the transformation process. Keeping a close eye on Zhang Xian's movements, ancient sage Mo Ling's eyelids twitched a little. He recognized the stone of divine crusade in Zhang Xian's hands, and he could sense the immense, pulsating soul energy harnessed within it. Even he felt deeply tempted by the power contained within it. Even as a blood reincarnation realm soul oracle, he knew that he would be unable to consume that much power at once. Most likely, he would explode before he could even swallow a tenth of it. Yet, the other party dared to tap into such an overwhelming source of energy, just for a breakthrough from sempiternal realm consummation to ancient sage. How in the world could anyone survive that? Ancient sage Mo Ling had thought that Zhang Xian would stop soon enough, but who would have thought that he would simply continue to absorb more and more soul energy? In less than 3 minutes, almost half of the soul energy created by the 100,000 souls sacrificed by Sovereign Chen Ling had been devoured. At that moment, his soul had also reached a size of more than 100 meters tall, making him appear to be a towering giant. Liquefy everything and achieve a breakthrough. In ancient sage Mo Ling's moment of shock, the massive soul suddenly bellowed furiously, and its towering figure began to shrink at an incredible rate. At the same time, a painting unrolled itself in the air. From within the painting, an ancient aura could be felt pouring out. This ancient aura contained a quality that had vanished countless years ago from the master-teacher continent. Aeon of ancient sage. Under the influx of this aura, Zhang Xian's soul swiftly grew purer, hastening the liquefying process of his soul. In less than 10 minutes, his soul had returned to his own size. However, the sheer concentration of soul energy packed in his soul felt as if he could tear apart space with just a simple wave of his hand. His entire soul emanated an air of history, reminiscent of an immortal. Ancient sage. The guild leader's soul cultivation has reached ancient sage. Seeing this transformation, ancient sage Mo Ling cried in agitation as his entire body trembled. While the breakthrough method used by Zhang Xian was different from anything that he had ever seen, the fact that his soul could contain so much power and harness such an aura meant that he had already overcome the bottleneck that hindered him and successfully arrived at a brand new realm. While the soul oracles at the otherworldly battlefield had preserved their lineage, they simply numbered too few. There were too few people whom they could pass on their arts to. In fact, ancient sage Mo Ling was the only ancient sage that the Soul Oracle Guild had at the moment, such that it was no exaggeration to say that he was the one propping up the entire guild. However, the breakthrough of the guild leader signified a new beginning for the Soul Oracle Guild. Under the leadership of the guild leader, he believed that it was only a matter of time before the Soul Oracle Guild rose to greatness once more. Hung long long, along with the pulsations of Zhang Xian's soul energy, the sky above began to ripple. Huge swathes of ominous clouds were quickly gathering around, and countless streaks of lightning and balls of flames raged within them. A devastating force was swiftly building up above. The ancient sage ordeal had arrived. Zhang Xian looked up into the sky and calmly remarked, "It's even more powerful than the aureate body ordeal." Having weathered the many different woes of life, his state of mind had become calmer than ever. Even though a frightening force was building up above him, threatening to crush him, it did not faze him at all. "Let me give this a try." A glint flashed across Zhang Xian's eyes as a thought suddenly came to his mind. He swiftly brought his soul back into his physical body. What's the guild leader planning to do? Seeing such a sight, ancient sage Mo Ling felt as if his brain was going to explode. The only thing that had achieved a breakthrough to ancient sage was Zhang Xian's soul. His physical body was still only at sempiternal realm consummation. The act of returning his soul back to his physical body meant that he was implicating his physical body in the cultivation ordeal. And this was as good as an act of suicide. Is he planning to use the stress from the ancient sage ordeal to temper his physical body and jinqi, so as to achieve a breakthrough to ancient sage for those two as well? Sovereign Chen Yong narrowed his eyes contemplatively. The reason for him possessing the tremendous strength that he did later in his life was because he had pushed himself past his limits back when he was younger. It was through such tenacity that he had eventually risen to become the strongest expert of the otherworldly demonic tribe. However, compared to the young master, it seemed like his tenacity really came nowhere close. Given the young master's talent, it was only a matter of time before he achieved a breakthrough to ancient sage, so there was no need for him to put himself at risk at all. Yet, the young master still chose to resort to such extreme means to temper himself and hasten his growth. To challenge the ancient sage ordeal with the sempiternal realm consummation physical body and jinqi was an extremely dangerous act. The slightest mistake could lead to one's death, such that it could be said that the risk was not worth taking at all. This was really too insane. Zhang Xian's actions had successfully caught the attention of everyone present, such that they even subconsciously halted their fights to see what was going on. Hong Long. As soon as Zhang Xian's soul returned to his physical body, his jinqi billowed, and his physical body trembled. Yet another two swathes of ominous clouds were conjured on the spot, and they swiftly merged together with the others. Heavenly flames and lightning streaks began crashing down furiously upon Zhang Xian, devouring his entire silhouette. The flames were black in color, indicating that they were empyrean heavenly flames. Furthermore, they harnessed even greater destructive prowess than what he had faced back when he was challenging the aureate body ordeal. Even ancient sage artifacts would swiftly melt before them. Aeon of Ancient Sage. With a bellow from Zhang Xian, the painting scroll opened up once more. An Aeon of Ancient Sage swiftly surged into Zhang Xian's body. In an instant, it felt as if someone had ignited every droplet of his blood, causing immense energy to emanate from his body to ward off the surrounding heat. Kacha! Kacha! Nevertheless, it did not take long before his skin and muscles began to char. Bloodied cracks swiftly crept across his body. Even though Zhang Xian was more powerful than normal cultivators, his physical body and jinqi were only at sempiternal realm consummation. There was no way that they could withstand such a powerful ancient sage ordeal. If not for his Heaven's Path jinqi continuously healing his body over and over again, he would have shattered into innumerable pieces already. Is it really impossible for me? Zhang Xian thought as he gritted his teeth to bear with the excruciating pain consuming his body. He knew that his ancient sage ordeal would be extraordinarily powerful. And just as Sovereign Chen Yong had thought, the reason that he had chosen to return his soul to his physical body was to utilize the pressure from the cultivation ordeal to push for a breakthrough. As dangerous as such an act would be, he felt that it was also a rare impetus that he could make use of to achieve more breakthroughs. After all, it was not every day that one would encounter such a powerful force. In the eyes of others, he was someone who faced no bottlenecks in his cultivation, and they felt that it was only a matter of time before he achieved a breakthrough to ancient sage. If nothing went wrong, he would surely achieve a breakthrough within the next 100 years. Achieving a breakthrough to ancient sage could definitely be said to be a miraculous feat, be it on the master-teacher continent, or among the otherworldly demonic tribe. The ones who had been able to do so in their dimension could be counted on a single hand. However, Zhang Xian could not bring himself to wait that long. He wanted to find Luo Ruoxin and hear the reason from her own mouth, or else it felt like he would lose his mind. He had been forcing himself to remain calm so far, but he did not know how long he could continue doing that. As such, no matter what the risks were, as long as an opportunity surfaced for him to climb to a greater height, he would grasp it even if the chances were that it would end in his death. Hung long long, lightning bolts and heavenly flames continued assaulting fervently. Zhang Xian felt as if he was being roasted alive inside a pill cauldron. His body was withering, and his junqi was dissipating. He was nearing his limits. Ancient sage blood. Zhang Xian flicked his wrist to take out a jade bottle before devouring its contents. Voila! Gulping down ancient sage blood, as if it was plain water, Zhang Xian was able to replenish his depleted energy and sustain himself for the time being. I need to push on. The image of the infernal black saber, Yuan Tao, and the dragonbone divine spear achieving a breakthrough to ancient sage came into Zhang Xian's mind, and he gritted his teeth in determination. Since they were able to clear their cultivation ordeals so easily, I can't lose. With such a thought in mind, he dashed right into the dark clouds. Find authorized novels and webnovel faster updates. Better experience, please click for visiting. This is insane. This is really downright insane. Ancient Sage Allfire exclaimed as his body shuddered uncontrollably. Despite being blessed with superior physical prowess, he had not dared dive into the midst of the dark clouds back when he had been facing his ancient sage ordeal. Given that his master's cultivation was only at great sage, was making such a move not as good as committing suicide? No matter how much power one could gain from achieving a breakthrough to ancient sage, it would be meaningless if one lost one's life in the process of doing so. Selah. Provoked by Zhang Xian's actions, the dark clouds in the sky flew into a rage. A massive bolt of lightning flashed across the sky, tearing open a pitch-black crack in space. Following which, the surrounding lightning bolts and flames began to gather around the pitch-black crack, causing the devastating force to slowly assume a corporeal form. From afar, it looked as if a gigantic saber of mass destruction was floating in the air. What is this? Wait a moment. Could this be the ordeal of lightning armament? But that can't possibly be. The ordeal of lightning armament is said to be a calamity that only appears when a person attempts a breakthrough to ancient sage for Dan Dimension Shatter Realm. Sovereign Chen Yong's face turned pale as his heart nearly leaped out of his throat. As the #1 expert of the otherworldly demonic tribe, and the grandson of Vicious, he had access to books regarding ancient sage for Dan Dimension Shatter Realm. It was detailed in those books that in order to reach the Dimension Shatter Realm, one had to undergo the ordeal of lightning armament. It was an ordeal where heavenly flames and lightning bolts were compressed into a corporeal state, assuming the form of divine weapons. Each of those weapons harnessed sufficient power to shatter the world, such that even he would easily have been sliced in two even if he had encountered it at his peak. His young master was only attempting a breakthrough to ancient sage, so why would such a formidable ordeal be summoned? It did not make sense. It's over. Ancient Sage Mo Ling and Ancient Sage Allfire were so terrified that they found themselves completely speechless. Even though they were unaware of what the ordeal of lightning armament was, they were well aware that the massive saber formed out of lightning bolts and heavenly flames in the sky was not something that they could face given their current strength. In fact, just by looking at the saber itself, they felt their minds falling into disarray from the terrifying power that it harnessed. Floating above the pedestal of the altar, Sovereign Chen Ling had fearfully halted the absorption of the energy bestowed onto him. At the same time, the dimension rift that had opened as a result of the summoning ritual had closed slightly. It seemed like there was no one who did not hold some deference toward the devastating force of nature. An ordinary breakthrough to ancient sage wouldn't have brought about such a powerful cultivation ordeal, even for me. However, I attempted to face the ancient sage ordeal with my soul, body, and junqi, and I even provoked it earlier by attempting to charge into it. Even Zhang Xian was unable to remain calm While standing in the face of such a terrifying force, he felt goosebumps rising all over his body. Zhang Hongtian and ancient sage Yan Qing had told him that the more times one attempted a breakthrough to ancient sage, the greater one's accomplishments would eventually be. Back then, Kong Shi had challenged the ancient sage ordeal a total of 3 times, before eventually choosing to push for a breakthrough on the 4th time. Yuan Tao had also challenged the ancient sage ordeal once, but he had chosen to suppress his cultivation and hold himself back from achieving a breakthrough right away. Considering that Zhang Xian had summoned the cultivation ordeal through the breakthrough in his soul cultivation, he should have been facing a single ancient sage ordeal at the moment. However, he had brought his physical body and junqi into the cultivation ordeal as well, and that had changed the nature of things. In short, he was facing the might of 3 ancient sage ordeals simultaneously. That was also why the ordeal of lightning armaments had been summoned. If he could overcome it, it would be equivalent to overcoming 3 ancient sage ordeals simultaneously. It would temper his physical body, junqi and soul, creating an incredibly firm foundation for future breakthroughs. However, if he failed, the curtains would be drawn on him. It would really be the end. He was really walking on a tightrope. He was in the truest sense going all in. You might be formidable, but I am a person who has overcome many adversities to come this far. If you think that you are able to can get me with just this, you are about to be proven wrong. Zhang Xian roared furiously as he charged toward the massive saber in the air. Voila! The moment that Zhang Xian's fist was about to reach its target, the massive saber also swung down from the sky as well. The immense pressure from just the downward motion of the saber immediately caused Zhang Xian's hand to crack, causing fresh blood to flow down his arms. His flesh was stripped away, revealing his bare white bones. Before the saber could reach his fist, the muscles on his arm had already been stripped away. No wonder this was the ordeal for Dimension Shatter Realm cultivators. It was truly a fearsome force to behold. With a furious roar, Zhang Xian drove his strength to his limits. Harmonizing his junqi, physical body, and soul together, the surrounding space immediately turned viscous. The ancient sage ordeal was not just a test from the heavens on a cultivator. It was also an opportunity for evolution. If one used a weapon to ward off the ancient sage ordeal, the benefits that he gained from it would be significantly reduced. Not only so, it might even trigger a backlash from the ancient sage ordeal, which could possibly make the situation even more life-threatening. This was similar to how the force of a leaving aperture ordeal increased exponentially the more people there were facing the cultivation ordeal. It was for this reason that Zhang Xian did not brandish his Dragonbone Divine Spear, opting to rely on his own strength instead. Sila, without a doubt, a full-force attack harnessing the limits of Zhang Xian's strength was indeed a force to behold. Even an average great philosopher realm ancient sage would find themselves getting bogged down by the attack in a moment's time. However, before the massive lightning saber in the sky, his strength seemed no different than a joke. The sky was torn apart in the blink of an eye, and the next moment, the flesh of Zhang Xian's upper body was shredded, revealing his ribcage. Excruciating pain. Despite his mental resilience, the pressure and pain that he was in had exceeded his limits. He felt his own consciousness blurring, on the verge of extinguishing, as though a candlelight in the midst of a storm. His clothes were burned to cinders, revealing a shriveled skeletal frame. The ordeal of lightning armament was simply too terrifying. It had surpassed the limits of what he could withstand in his current realm. Not even a single breath had passed from the moment that the saber began descending till his flesh and blood were dissipated. And the saber had not even reached him yet. All of the damage that Zhang Xian had sustained came solely from the saber's overwhelming aura, and the shockwave coming from the momentum of its movement. If the saber really fell on him, he would surely be killed in a heartbeat. It seems like I have really screwed up. This was the thought that had surfaced in Zhang Xian's mind in that moment. He had thought that he could make use of the opportunity to push for a breakthrough in his physical body and junqi cultivation. However, it seemed like he had overestimated his own capabilities, such that the situation had gone out of his control. But I won't be going down that easily either. Knowing that he would die without a shred of doubt if he continued holding back, he closed his eyes and willed. The next instant, a body identical to his suddenly appeared right in front of him, and it charged straight up toward the saber. Clone! To think that you still have the cheek to claim that you are the main body, when you can't even deal with a measly cultivation ordeal. Don't you feel embarrassed? Watch as I shatter this saber with a single punch. The clone roared proudly as he faced the massive saber. Using this brief moment of respite, Zhang Xian hurriedly took out ancient sage blood of blood reincarnation realm cultivators, and gulped it down so as to replenish his jinqi and nourish his body. All that was left of the current him was a bag of bones contained within a sack of skin. If not for the overwhelming vitality that he had accumulated from drinking ancient sage blood from blood reincarnation realm cultivators, and the miraculous regenerative capability of the heavens path jinqi, he would have already died. Under the nourishment of the blood essence, his flesh and bones slowly began to grow back. From the looks of it, it would take several years before he could recover back to his former state. Nevertheless, it was already a huge blessing that he was still alive after facing that terrifying saber. So this was nothing for him to complain about. Shaking his head, Zhang Xian turned his gaze toward his clone in the sky. It was little surprised that his clone did not stand a chance against the saber either. However, due to his body being made out of the 9 hearts lotus, the clone was able to swiftly reform himself, even after he was sliced into 2, putting the ordeal of lightning armament at a loss as to how it should deal with him for a moment. This is his clone. How did he get such a powerful clone? Will he really be able to survive like this? Find authorized novels and web novel faster updates. Better experience, please click for visiting. Upon seeing the clone for the very first time, the crowd around widened their eyes in shock. This was especially so for ancient sage Mo Ling. His entire body was trembling in agitation. Indestructible. That was exactly the kind of body that all soul oracles wanted to lay their hands on. If they could obtain such a body, they would really be able to live for an eternity without fearing anything at all. No, it seems like his clone is still too weak after all. He won't be able to block the saber for much longer. The massive saber did slow down a little with the interference of Zhang Xian's clone, but it was still trudging forward in its trajectory. It was just a short moment away from crushing Zhang Xian's soul into bits. In that desperate moment, Zhang Xian swiftly whipped out the Stone of Divine Crusade once more and flicked it toward his clone. Tss. The clone swiftly grabbed the Stone of Divine Crusade and began absorbing the rich energy harnessed within. Zhang Xian had only used up half of the soul energy in the Stone of Divine Crusade earlier, so there was still another good half left in there for his clone's use. Devouring the massive amount of soul energy, the clone's cultivation surged by leaps and bounds, granting him greater strength to fend off the descending saber. It almost looked as if the tables were turning in Zhang Xian's favor, as the saber slowed down even more, and it seemed like it was about to come to a halt. Kacha! Kacha! At the same time, the clone's soul cultivation shot right up to sempiternal realm consummation, and it was still marching with imposing momentum toward a breakthrough to ancient sage. The canvas of 4 seasons opened once more, and the aeon of ancient sage swiftly gushed into his body. Boom! In just a few moments, the clone had already shattered the bottleneck limiting him, opening up a new world. He was able to achieve a much easier breakthrough than Zhang Xian, because he was able to access Zhang Xian's mind and tap into his experiences, which allowed him to advance his cultivation much more smoothly. Boom! As soon as the clone achieved a breakthrough, huge swathes of dark clouds began gathering around the area once more. A fresh influx of lightning bolts and heavenly flames surged into Saber, which had barely come to a halt just a moment ago, filling it with more energy. Zhang Xian's eyebrows leaped up in horror. It was a spontaneous decision on his part to toss the Stone of Divine Crusade to the clone, hoping that the latter would gain sufficient strength to halt the ordeal of lightning armament. He did not think that the other party would achieve a breakthrough and bring in another cultivation ordeal. Considering that he and his clone essentially shared a soul, this could be considered as his 4th ancient sage ordeal. Absorbing the fresh influx of lightning bolts and heavenly flames, The already massive saber doubled in size. Its dark blade emanated such a terrifying pressure that it tore open glaring scars one after another in the sky. The aura that it emanated was so powerful that not even the Dragonbone Divine Spear would dare stand against it. The feeling that death was encroaching on him felt more vivid than ever to Zhang Xian at that moment, causing his hair to stand on end. If we allow it to descend, we'll surely die without the slightest doubt. Knowing the might of the saber, Zhang Xian quickly racked his brain for a solution. The might harnessed within the saber was simply too appalling. If they failed to stop it, they would be disintegrated into nothingness. Easy, carrying the might to dissipate everything in the world, the saber sliced down on the clone and decisively split him in two. Even if his clone had reached ancient sage, there was no way that he could stand against such a calamity of nature. Boom! Nevertheless, the clone swiftly gathered himself together again and again as he desperately pushed against the saber. Despite the immense difference in strength, the clone's tenacity still paid off. The descent of the saber began slowing a little. Nevertheless, the situation still was not looking good for them. Knowing that he would really meet his end here at this rate, Zhang Xian anxiously turned to Sovereign Qinyong and instructed, "Quick, help me look around and find someone who is on the verge of a breakthrough. It has to be someone who can summon a lightning tribulation." You want to find someone who can achieve a breakthrough right now and summon a lightning tribulation? Sovereign Qinyong was stunned, but he knew that his young master had his reasons for doing so. Thus, he quickly turned to issue an instruction to Lu Yang. "Yes, Your Majesty." Lu Yang nodded in response. He shot a sweeping glance at his surroundings before swiftly grabbing a Saint Nine Dan cultivator in the vicinity and infusing a surge of his Jinqi into the latter. As soon as the surge of Jinqi spread across the Saint Nine Dan cultivator's body, the bottleneck that had been limiting him immediately shattered, and dark clouds began gathering once more. Great! Seeing the familiar black mass, Zhang Xian heaved a sigh of relief. He immediately sent a telepathic message over. "Little tribulation, is that you?" Boom! Hearing those words, the dark clouds staggered. For a moment, it seemed as if the dark clouds were going to run away, but they eventually shook themselves and reluctantly drifted over to Zhang Xian's side. It was clear that the ordeal of lightning armament was not the same little tribulation whom Zhang Xian usually hung out with. Nevertheless, as fellow cultivation ordeals, he thought that there might be some kind of camaraderie among them such that little tribulation could help speak up on his behalf. "I have a cultivation technique here that can enhance your abilities, and I'll impart it to you right now. However, I need you to block that saber over there for me," Zhang Xian said. Following which, he activated the impartation of heaven's will and began a lecture. He had already seen through the flaws of little tribulation a long time ago, and he had thought about how he could offer the latter pointers too. Thus, all he had to do was regurgitate the knowledge that was in his mind. Is he teaching the lightning tribulation? Are you telling me that the lightning tribulation is his pet? Everyone was stunned. They had seen people taming beasts, humans, and artifacts before, but this was the first time in their long lives that they had seen someone tame a lightning tribulation. Sovereign Qinyong, Ancient Sage Mo Ling, Ancient Sage Allfire, and all of the others were rendered utterly speechless. The scene that was unfolding before their eyes was so mind-boggling that the rational sides of their minds had completely shut down. Lightning had always been a representation of the wrathful retribution of the heavens. It served to punish the arrogant cultivators who dared defy fate and attempt to reach something beyond what they were. Yet, at that moment, it was actually heeding the commands of a mere cultivator. How in the world was that possible? That's my teacher." Lu Yang's heart quivered in agitation. The means of his teacher were indeed incredible. No matter how desperate a situation was, he would always be able to somehow achieve the impossible and turn the tables around. Hung Long. After hearing Zhang Xian's pointers, the dark clouds swayed a little as lightning crackled within them. They could feel that the rate they were able to gather power had hastened significantly. Putting aside the Saint Nine Dan cultivator below, who had just achieved a breakthrough, the clouds felt that they would not even break a sweat even if they had to face dozens more. At the same time, the Saint Nine Dan cultivator, whose breakthrough had summoned the lightning tribulation, found his face turning completely pale in fright. Just who in the world did he offend for such a thing to happen to him? There was still a long life ahead of him, and he did not want to be zapped to death just yet. Paying no heed to the otherworldly demon below who was on the verge of tears, Zhang Xian commanded Little Tribulation, "Help me block the ordeal of lightning armament." The cultivation technique that Zhang Xian had imparted to Little Tribulation was designed in a manner such that it would only make it a more frightening force against the otherworldly demons. There would not be make any difference to the cultivation ordeals of human cultivators. This would ensure that the number of experts in the ranks of the otherworldly demonic tribe would slowly decrease, and with sufficient time, they would not pose a threat to mankind anymore. Hong Long, Little Tribulation was extremely hesitant to stand against the ordeal of lightning armament. But between the ordeal of lightning armament and Zhang Xian, the latter was much more frightening to it. Thus, it clenched its precipitation tightly together as it marched up to the ordeal of lightning armament to confront it. Seeing that a measly lightning tribulation of a Saint Nine Dan cultivator actually dared hinder it, the massive saber swung itself downward and sliced the dark clouds apart, dissipating them into the surroundings. Boom! With a thunderous roar, Little Tribulation gathered whatever was left of itself together and reformed itself to stand against the ordeal of lightning armament. However, with most of its mass dissipated, Little Tribulation looked like a non-threatening ball of black fluff. Seeing this, Zhang Xian slapped his hand on his forehead before turning around to address the crowd. "Is there anyone else who wants to make a breakthrough? Forget it, I'll just do it myself." Seeing everyone below averting their gazes from him, Zhang Xian opened his mouth and began lecturing. The crux of cultivation lies in the cultivation of character. A righteous heart, a dignified demeanor, a prudent mouth. His voice echoed resoundingly across the entire area. The cultivators standing behind Lu Yang tried not to pay attention to the lecture, but by the end of the first sentence, they were already completely absorbed in his teachings. Smiles blossomed on their faces as the complications that had bogged them down previously were suddenly lifted, bringing them a feeling of epiphany. It was as if all of the knowledge that they had learned was converging together, forming a big picture about cultivation that they had never known about. Kacha, kacha, kacha. And then the breakthroughs started, leaving Aperture Realm, Dimension Sundering Realm, Macrocosm Ascendancy Realm. Dark clouds swiftly congregated in the area and bulked up the weakened Little Tribulation, causing it to swell up quickly, as if it had been injected with steroids. Thunderous claps filled with the surroundings as lightning crackled around frenziedly. It was as if Little Tribulation was parading its newfound powers. Nevertheless, Zhang Xian carried on with his lecture. Within a short 10 minutes, there were over 2,000 cultivators who had achieved a breakthrough, and over 500 of them had managed to summon a lightning tribulation. By that point, Little Tribulation covered the entire capital, and even a single bolt of lightning from it was for visiting. Shortly after the clone left, Zhang Xian also felt energy leaving his body. He had really exhausted himself both physically and mentally this time around, and he plopped onto the ground with a fatigued look on his face. He would never have been so reckless if he had known that this would happen. If not for the fact that they were in the capital of the otherworldly demonic tribe, where there were plenty of cultivators whom he could grab off the street, as well as his good relations with Little Tribulation, he would have bitten the dust there. Hung long long. Meanwhile, Little Tribulation and the ordeal of lightning armament continued to pit their powers against one another. Eventually, the latter ended up depleting its energy first, and it began to dissipate away. As the pressure crushing down on him vanished, Zhang Xian immediately felt a brand new power sprouting from the depths of his body. This was an energy that could reconstruct him and bring him up to a higher level of existence. Suppress. Zhang Xian willed as he quelled that burst of power forcefully. He could achieve a breakthrough to Ancient Sage if he wanted to, but that would mean that he would lose this golden opportunity to temper himself and build up a solid foundation. This might hinder from reaching greater heights in the future. With all that he had been through, He knew that he would require as much strength as possible in order to protect those around him and attain what he wanted. Halala! Forcefully suppressing the sprouting energy, Zhang Xian's cultivation slowly receded back to sempiternal realm consummation. Seeing that the mess was finally over, he heaved a sigh of relief. He turned to Little Tribulation and said, "I'm grateful for your help this time around. You can return now." Who? Little Tribulation glanced at the several hundred cultivators who had summoned it over, and chills immediately ran down the spines of those several hundred cultivators. Fortunately, after a moment of hesitation, it swayed a little before dissipating into the surroundings as well. When it finally dissipated entirely, Zhang Xian felt completely depleted. It seemed as if there was not the slightest ounce of strength left in his body. While this breakthrough had brought him infinitesimally close to Ancient Sage, he had sustained great damage in the process as well. All that was left of him at the moment was his skeletal rack with some flesh and blood that he had just recovered. It was truly a huge sacrifice. Even if he used the blood essence of blood reincarnation realm experts to replenish his vitality, it would still take several years before his body could fully recover. Kill him. Barely after Zhang Xian thought that he could take a rest, a vicious glint flashed through the eyes of one of the otherworldly demon ancient sages, siding with Sovereign Qinling. With the thought that he could exploit this momentary opening to eradicate this looming threat, he charged forward and drove his palm right into Zhang Xian's head. The commotion that was caused by the earlier breakthrough had been so great that it shook those who had witnessed the sight to their cores. Those standing on Sovereign Qinling's side swiftly came to the realization that if they could not get rid of the young man while they had the chance, it was only a matter of time before the young man grew to become an existence that none of them could defeat. As enemies siding with opposite factions, that would spell disaster for them. Young master, not expecting the enemy to make a move so quickly, Sovereign Qingyong immediately charged forward to save him. The Dragonbone Divine Spear, which had been watching intently not too far away, also swiftly darted in to protect its master. However, before anyone could do a thing, Zhang Xian raised his hand instinctively to defend against the abrupt assault from the otherworldly demon ancient sage. Pada! It started off with the arm of the otherworldly demon ancient sage being crushed to dust, and as the might traveled upward, the body of the otherworldly demon ancient sage abruptly exploded. Even his soul did not manage to make it out alive. Everyone was stunned. The ancient sage who had attempted to assault Zhang Xian had been at Ancient Sage 1 Dan Bloodline Continuance Realm, but he had died from a single palm strike from a sempiternal realm consummation cultivator. What? Zhang Xian was also taken aback. Despite the state of his body, he could feel that his strength had grown considerably after undergoing the tempering of the ancient sage ordeal. Nevertheless, as he had not exactly achieved a breakthrough to ancient sage, he had thought that his strength would, at the very most, be on par with any other bloodline continuance realm cultivator. Yet, a casual strike from him in his weakened state had actually brought about the death of a bloodline continuance realm cultivator. My current strength. It's already comparable to blood reincarnation realm primary stage. Swiftly taking a look at his internal condition, his body began trembling in agitation. He had never thought that he would actually obtain strength that could rival blood reincarnation realm primary stage experts when he had not achieved a breakthrough to ancient sage. It was no wonder Kong Shi had chosen to suppress his cultivation so many times before pushing for a breakthrough. It was indeed highly beneficial to the growth of one's cultivation. Kill them. The sight of Zhang Xian killing a bloodline continuance realm ancient sage with a casual wave of his hand had really scared the remaining ancient sages on Sovereign Qinling's side out of their wits. Knowing that this was the opportune moment to strike, Sovereign Qingyong immediately gave the order to attack. Floating at the top of the pedestal, Sovereign Qinling looked at the happenings around him with a livid expression on his face. However, knowing that there was nothing he could do, he hurriedly absorbed the energy that was coming from the dimension rift above to recover from his injuries. A thought suddenly came to Zhang Xian's mind. Wait a moment. If the energy above the pedestal can help Sovereign Qinling recover from his injuries, Could it possibly have the same effect on me as well? 100 zhang equals 333. 3 meters. Zhang Xian's injuries had been caused by the ordeal of lightning armament. Many of his vital organs, muscles, and meridians had been destroyed, and it was only due to the overwhelming vitality and the heaven's pathshenqi in his body that he had been able to prevent his physical state from deteriorating any further. His very foundations had been destroyed, such that he could not heal himself using ordinary means. In a sense, his current condition was similar to that of vicious and sovereign Chen Yong. He could only allow time to do its work and repair his tattered foundations, and there was no way to accelerate the process. But just because he was unable to do it did not mean that others were incapable of doing so. The wounds that Sovereign Chen Ling had sustained were even more severe than his, but the other party was still able to recover swiftly through the use of the altar. Was it possible for him to tap into the same power? I was nearly killed when I tried to barge into the ritual earlier. It's likely that the deity summoned by the ritual identifies one through one's soul, aura, and energy. An idea suddenly sprouted in Zhang Xian's mind, and he swiftly began to calculate the chances of pulling it off. He did not know whether he could use the energy bestowed by the deity of heal his injuries, but just approaching the ritual posed a problem. Earlier, when he tried to barge in to terminate the ritual, a powerful force had nearly wiped him off the face of the world. Even with the recent surge in his fighting prowess, to a level comparable to a blood reincarnation realm primary stage expert, he could tell that he would still stand no chance against that powerful force. It would simply end in his annihilation. In other words, he would have to find other means to bypass the detection of the deity. Zhang Xian's eyes lit up. Disguising as Sovereign Chen Ling. As long as my aura and bloodline are identical to his, such that even the deities are unable to tell the difference between the both of us, I will be able to absorb the energy descending upon the pedestal. Even if brute force failed, he still had a trick up his sleeve, the disguise amulet that Luo Ruoxin had given him. It was something that he could use even after he had turned into a skeleton. Let me give it a try. Unable to curb his excitement, Zhang Xian activated the amulet, and he swiftly warped into Sovereign Chen Ling's form. Be it in terms of external appearance or soul aura, there was no way that one could tell the difference between him and the real one. Young master? Sovereign Chen Yong asked doubtfully. He had been following the spirit god all along, so he knew about the existence of the disguise amulet. However, he was a little perplexed as to why the young master would suddenly choose to disguise himself as Sovereign Chen Ling. Zhang Xian nodded in response with a slight smile. With his tall and graceful stature, he discreetly flitted over to the dimension rift in the air. Wang wang wang! The ripples of power that had previously kept him away showed no sign of warding him off. Just like that, he managed to slip into the ritual without any trouble. As expected, it works. Zhang Xian trembled in agitation. It seemed like the disguise amulet that Luo Ruoxin had given him was at a higher level than whatever deity Sovereign Chen Ling was summoning. As such, even the deity was unable to see through his disguise. Ha ha ha! Standing right beneath the dimension rift, Zhang Xian absorbed a bit of the energy descending from above. In an instant, his physical body began recovering at a visible rate, and his fatigued spirit was nourished and healed as well. At this rate, I'll be able to return to my peak within 10 minutes. Perhaps, I might even be able to further my cultivation. Zhang Xian's eyes shone brilliantly. Despite his severe wounds, Zhang Xian was in a far more advantageous position than Sovereign Chen Ling. Both his youth and the unique nature of the heaven's pathshenqi allowed for faster recovery. Even when they were both in the same environment, chances were that he would be able to recover much faster than Sovereign Chen Ling. Thus, he began devouring the energy ravenously, as if a parched traveler who had stumbled upon an oasis. Just moments after Zhang Xian began absorbing the energy, he sensed a pair of sharp eyes staring heatedly at him. Turning to look, he saw Sovereign Chen Ling glaring at him with a vile look on his face. The bestowal of the deity's blessing was a sacred formality of the ritual, and making a move at this very moment was absolutely prohibited. Otherwise, if he incurred the wrath of the deity, he would be torn apart. As such, All he could do was glare at Zhang Xian murderously. But watching as that fellow snatched away the energy that was intended for his recovery, Sovereign Chunling's heart ached so badly that he could hardly hold his anger back. How in the world did a sack of bones disguise so impeccably as him, such that even the deities were unable to see through his disguise? Just what in the world was going on? Can anyone tell me what's going on? Who am I? Where am I? You shameless knave. Sovereign Chunling spat icily. So be it. I, Sovereign Chunling, have never intended on living an upright life anyway. Zhang Xian replied nonchalantly. You bastard. I am Sovereign Chunling. Seeing the other party adopting his identity, Sovereign Chunling felt as if he was going insane. Sure, you are Sovereign Chunling happy? Zhang Xian replied perfunctorily, as he continued gobbling up the surrounding energy hungrily. It was clear that there was something holding Sovereign Chunling back from making a move on him. Or else the latter would have already pounced at him. Since the latter was unable to do anything to him, there was no point bickering at all. Feel free to say whatever you like. I'll just quietly have my meal over here. Gaga. The energy descending from the dimension rift swiftly gathered around him and formed a massive vortex. It did not take long before they were all absorbed into his body. His true body, hidden beneath the disguise amulet, began squirming around as his body reconstructed itself. His head, shoulders, arms, chests. It was as if he was being reborn with every bit of energy absorbed. This is a good opportunity for me to alter my meridian network to be the same as Zhao Ye's. Zhang Xian thought as he began working on his meridians. A human's biological structure was more or less fixed, such that it would only be possible to make minor modifications under normal circumstances. However, what Zhang Xian was doing at that moment was rebuilding his body from scratch, so he could modify it freely. As such, the reconstruction of his meridians proceeded even more smoothly than Zhao Ye's operation with the vine of the Dongshu gourd. Along with the modification of his meridians, an astoundingly pure killing intent seeped out of his body. Is this the purest jinchi of slaughter? Ever since Elder Vicious' death, there hasn't been anyone in our spirit tribe who has boasted such pure jinchi of slaughter. Could he possibly be the reincarnation of Elder Vicious? With such a pure bloodline, there's no doubt that he's the true leader of the spirit tribe. The otherworldly demons who had listened to Zhang Xian's lecture earlier and wondered if he was a master teacher had their doubts vanquished in an instant. How could someone with such pure jinchi of slaughter possibly be a human? Not even the three sovereigns possessed such a pure bloodline. Voila! The otherworldly demons swiftly got to their knees and lowered their heads, as if they were ushering the arrival of their new leader. Be it the debt from the impartation of knowledge, or the natural deference toward a nobler existence than them. At that very moment, toward the young man in the air who was disguised as Sovereign Chunling, they only harbored feelings of admiration and respect. On the other hand, seeing how his people were bowing down and submitting to that scoundrel, the real Sovereign Chunling was teetering on the edge of a complete mental breakdown. While others might be unaware who this fellow was, he knew very well that the other party was the #1 genius of mankind, a master teacher through and through. Yet, for his people to actually worship the other party instead of him, ludicrous. You lowly swine. Even at the risk of turning a deity against me, I'll claim your life right here and right now. Seeing that the other party was already on the brink of making a full recovery, Sovereign Chunling could not bring himself to wait any longer. Despite the risk of incurring the deity's wrath, he swiped his fingers toward Zhang Xian, as if they were claws. Boom! Even though Sovereign Chunling could not recover as quickly as Zhang Xian did, he had spent a longer time in the ritual than the other party. By now, his injuries had recovered by around 70 to 80%, allowing him to draw forth the strength of a true blood reincarnation realm consummation expert. Find authorized novels and webnovel faster updates. Better experience, please click for visiting. Not expecting the other party to be so impatient, Zhang Xian scowled in displeasure. Wait a moment. I'm still lacking 2 more thighs to a full recovery. Why don't we both heal up nicely before coming to blows? Activating the Heaven's Path movement art, he dodged the attack nimbly. At the same time, He widened all of his acupoints to devour the surrounding energy as quickly as he could. In an instant, the rate of his recovery soared. As he was currently disguised as Sovereign Qinling, he could not make use of his clone, weapons, or even vicious. Thus, it was impossible for him to kill Sovereign Qinling. However, it would not be easy for Sovereign Qinling to get him either. Wait your head. Seeing how the other party dared to speak so brazenly even after stealing the energy that he had paid a heavy price in order to obtain, Sovereign Qinling nearly went berserk. That's my power. I sacrificed 100,000 tribesmen and countless treasures in exchange for this power. So how dare you snatch it away from me? You want to recover your thighs? I'll smash your head into smithereens. Sovereign Qinling looked as if he was convulsing so intensely that he was suffering from a stroke. The young man before him was truly infuriating. Every word that came out of his mouth made him feel as if he could choke on his own breath. How can you speak so brazenly despite being a petty thief? Do you have no sense of pride whatsoever? Grinding his teeth, Sovereign Qinling sent yet another powerful palm strike toward Zhang Xian. Kacha! The surroundings turned utterly dark. Sovereign Qinling's might was so great that even the heavens seemed to tremor in deference to him. Zhang Xian dodged his attack yet again. However, seeing that the other party was getting fiercer and fiercer, hindering him from absorbing the energy and recovering, he finally blew his top. He raised his head and bellowed, "Deity of the higher dimension, this fellow not only disguised himself as me to steal your power, he even dares to make a move on me in your presence. It's obvious that he has a complete lack of respect for you. It's of the utmost importance that you punish him severely. Why the heck are you causing such a huge ruckus? Can't you just sit quietly by the side and absorb the energy? Find authorized novels and web novel faster updates. Better experience, please click for visiting. What a wonderful thing it is to enjoy the peaceful silence and immerse one's senses in the wonders of the world. Don't you think that it's crude to go around killing others? To think that you are even respected as one of the sovereigns of the otherworldly demonic tribe, yet you don't even have the patience to hold yourself still. Horrible. Seeing the other party speak the words that he wanted to say, Sovereign Qinling's body staggered. Screw you. His blood billowed furiously through his organs, leaving him feeling as if he would vomit large mouthfuls of blood at any moment. You scoundrel, remember your place. You are the one who has come here as a robber. How can you be so shameless as to report me first? Grasping at his hair frenziedly, Sovereign Qinling knew that he would only anger himself further the more he spoke. Thus, he decided to put aside all words and smash his palm right toward Zhang Xian. This time, his palm strike harnessed his entire rage, making it several times more powerful than before. Sensing danger from the palm strike, Zhang Xian instantaneously moved to dodge the attack. However, he felt as if something was holding his body still, preventing him from moving at all. Damn it! I'll just have to go all out. Knowing that he might lose his life if he continued taking the matter lightly, Zhang Xian had no choice but to grit his teeth regretfully as he halted the absorption of the surrounding energy. He raised his palm, but before he could exert his strength, he suddenly felt an intense jolt from above. The jolt rippled downward and shook Sovereign Qinling and him, as if they were lone boats in the face of an extreme current. He staggered in the air and nearly plummeted to the ground. Puh! Under the jolt, Sovereign Qinling's attack also dissipated without a trace. What's going on? Zhang Xian narrowed his eyes as he turned his gaze upward, the direction where the jolt had originated from. The dimension rift, which was emanating the energy that had facilitated his recovery, had become even darker and more glaring. Slowly, an arm was slowly reaching out from it. The intense energy jolt earlier had originated from this arm. This is bad. There's really a deity above. Given how a mere arm was able to render such helplessness within him, there was no doubt that the being above them had far surpassed blood reincarnation realm consummation. Zhang Xian's face darkened as he hurriedly drove his Jinqi to absorb the energy lingering in the area. He knew that he would lose his opportunity to absorb the energy and heal up the moment that the deity descended upon their world. He had mostly recovered, and all that remained were his two thighs. As long as he hurried, He might just be able to make it in time. Otherwise, even if it was just his 2 thighs, it would probably take him many years to heal them back to their original state. The muscles in his thighs recovered at a rate visible to the eye, and before long, one of his thighs was already completely healed. Seeing how the other party dared to continue absorbing the energy despite the appearance of the arm of the deity, Sovereign Chunling grew frenzied. Of all of the greedy people in the world, there was probably no one who could hold a candle to the young man before him. If not for the fact that he did not manage to calculate the value of the artifacts properly prior to the ritual, causing the energy bestowed to be far greater than what he needed, there was no way that he would have been able to fully recover with this fellow barging in and absorbing the energy as he liked. Despite that, he had only recovered by roughly 80% so far. He was still some way off from making a full recovery. On the other hand, the other party had recovered by at least 90%. Sovereign Chunling knew that if he continued with his act of aggression, when the deity from the ritual was already descending to their world, there was a good chance that he would be killed. Thus, he clenched his jaws hatefully before turning his attention back to absorbing the energy. "You thief, that's mine." But barely after Sovereign Chunling started absorbing the energy once more, he suddenly heard an infuriated bellow sounding from the opposite side. Following which, he saw the other party raising his palm and striking it over. Voila! A massive current of sword chi whizzed over, encircling him tightly. Alarmed, Sovereign Chunling hurriedly stopped absorbing the energy to avoid the attack. However, just as he was about to do so, he realized that the massive current of sword chi was a feint. Despite its imposing appearance, the massive current of sword chi dissipated, as if bubbles upon reaching him. It was just an act to scare him. Teasy. Meanwhile, the other party continued to absorb the energy. Damn it! Sovereign Chunling trembled with rage as he cursed. Taking a deep breath, he opened up the acupoints in his body, once more to absorb the energy again, when the other party suddenly flicked his finger, and a burst of sword chi shot in his direction. It went without saying that Sovereign Chunling immediately took evasive action to avoid the sword chi, only to find that it was another feint. That fellow doesn't dare make a move in front of the deity either. He's intentionally preventing me from absorbing the energy to stop me from making a full recovery. At this point, Sovereign Chunling finally understood what the other party was up to. The fact that the arm of the deity had appeared was an indication that the deity could very well descend upon their world if they continued fooling around in his presence. No matter how brazen Zhang Xian might be, there was no way that he would really make a move in the presence of the deity for fear of divine retribution. In other words, the purpose behind Zhang Xian's actions was not to hurt him, but to hinder his cultivation, so that he could devour more of the energy bestowed by the deity. With such a thought in mind, Sovereign Chunling's heart was put at ease. He put his full attention into absorbing the energy lingering around the area. However, just as he was getting into the mood, he suddenly felt his hair standing on end. Out of sheer instinct, he reacted in a split second and took a side step. Puha! It was a sharp, chilling sensation. A surge of sword chi had pierced through Sovereign Chunling's chest. If not for his powerful instincts, his heart might have been pierced through. The heck? Sovereign Chunling was really on the verge of exploding. Earlier, the other party had been afraid to make a move, using all sorts of tricks to slow him down. Yet, as soon as he started cultivating, the other party immediately flicked his sword chi over for real. Are you really not afraid of the wrath of the deities? Are you trying to drag me down together with you? Filled with rage, Sovereign Chunling was just about to dash over to tussle with the other party, when the other party suddenly stopped absorbing the energy altogether. The other party lowered his head and clasped his fist toward the deity. Oh great deity! I was simply too enraged at that scoundrel for impersonating me and absorbing your powers. How could a mere thief dare behave in such a preposterous manner? Please permit me to kill him. Otherwise, what will become of your reputation if such matters are simply left to be? Astonishingly, the words that he spoke were actually the authentic ancient language of the otherworldly demonic tribe. Even Sovereign Chunling had practiced for a very long time, before being able to speak the language. Sila. Those words incurred the wrath of the deity within the dimension rift. A vortex formed within the dimension rift, and another hand slowly crept out. With a slight flick of its wrist, Sovereign Chunling was slammed into the ground. Lying weakly on the ground, Sovereign Chunling murmured in disbelief, "Deity." This was the deity whom he had been contacting all this while. An entirely different entirety from the spirit god whom Sovereign Chunyong worshipped. It was with such a trump card in hand that he had dared to scheme against Sovereign Chunyong. He had been constantly offering treasures and artifacts to this deity. And in return, he had been granted great strength that allowed him to stand his ground even against the powerful Sovereign Chunyong. Yet, the deity whom he had been worshipping actually turned against him, just because of a couple of words uttered by this scoundrel. Was the deity really unable to tell that he was the real one? Trembling in fury, Sovereign Chunling swung his finger in Zhang Xian's direction, intending to expose the latter's false identity to the deity. However, what he saw was the young man sitting peacefully in the air with his acupoints fully open, absorbing the energy lingering in the area. His thighs had recovered together with his feet, and all that was left were his 10 toes. The heck? Sovereign Chunling felt an ache in his heart, and all that was left in his mind were unspeakable expletives. Shameless and scrupulous and monstrously talented. Just when did such a difficult character appear amid the humans? If this man was left to be, his existence would eventually become the greatest threat to the spirit tribe. Had Sovereign Chunling known that there was such a powerful foe among the humans, there was no way he would have schemed against Sovereign Chunyong. Instead, he would have collaborated with Sovereign Chunyong to get rid of this threat. As stifled as Sovereign Chunling felt, he soon heaved a sigh of relief. There should be no reason for that bastard to continue absorbing the energy once he healed his toes. Then, he would be able to make use of the remaining energy to heal himself. Once he recovered to full strength, he was confident that he would be able to tear that bastard into shreds. With a grim look on his face, Sovereign Chunling turned his attention back to absorbing the energy. Just as he had expected, it did not take long for the other party to regenerate his toes. He thought that it was finally time for him to speed up his healing process. But contrary to his expectations, the other party suddenly took out a painting and began frenziedly drawing the surrounding energy into the painting. Screw this. Sovereign Chunling's body trembled in disbelief upon seeing this sight. Aren't you one greedy little bastard? After having your fill of the energy, you even want to take the rest away with you? Sovereign Chunling felt as if there was a puddle of fresh blood accumulating at the back of his throat, ready to spurt forth at any moment. That fellow was really getting worse and worse by the moment. Furthermore, what the heck was with that painting? This energy was bestowed directly from the deity, so what kind of painting could possibly have the ability to store even that? Wait a moment, is that Kongshir's canvas of 4 seasons? With a swift glance, Sovereign Chunling came to a sudden realization. The painting had its own independent spatial and temporal laws, such that it could be called an independent world by itself. The only painting that was known to have achieved such a level was Kongshir's canvas of 4 seasons. He could tell that the other party had also achieved a breakthrough to Ancient Sage through tapping into the aeon of Ancient Sage sealed within the painting. The other party's arms swayed around frantically, almost as if 1,000 hands Buddha. The concentration of energy in the area swiftly grew sparser and sparser, as it was pumped furiously into the painting. Shockingly, the rate at which the painting was devouring the energy was at least 10 times faster than that of Sovereign Chunling. In other words, no matter how he tussled with the painting over the energy, the result was that he would only receive, at most, 1/10 of the limited energy remaining. This energy should have been mine. It's all mine. Knowing that there was no way he would be able to fully recover from his energy at this rate, Sovereign Chunling could not remain calm. He gathered the entirety of his energy and dashed forward. You piece of shit. I'm going to slaughter you. Unfortunately, the gaze of the deity was already upon this area. Kacha! Before he could reach Zhang Xian, the palm from the dimension rift struck down once more, causing Sovereign Chunling's body to slam forcefully onto the ground. At that point, he was truly already on the brink of tears. Was he going to lose the support of the deity, whom he had worshipped for so long, over such shady lies of the other party? Ridiculous. Seeing the look on Sovereign Qinling's face, Zhang Xian shook his head coldly. Geez. Of course, it was not that the deity trusted his words. The reason that the deity made a move on Sovereign Qinling was because the latter had broken the rules and used his powers recklessly. The deity is already on the verge of climbing out of the dimension rift to pass judgment upon us. But you still dared to make a move before him. Aren't you simply asking for trouble? That's why humility is always the way to go. Live a humble life, and trouble won't come knocking on your door. Doing too much before the deities often has the opposite effect. The trick is to maintain a calm heart. Just take a look at me. Aren't I the perfect example? While praising himself for his distinguished traits, he turned his attention back to his own body, and his eyes shone in delight. To allow him to recover to his peak from a pile of bones so swiftly, the means of the deities were indeed formidable. Ho. Zhang Xian continued flapping his hands, as if a fan to guide the movement of the surrounding energy into the painting. In a short 3 minutes, all of the remaining energy lingering in the surroundings had already been fully transferred into the painting. With such a huge inventory of the energy from a deity, even if he were to get injured in the future, there would be very little he would have to be worried about. In fact, if things went well, he could even use the energy to help Vicious fully recover from his current state. After all that was done, Zhang Xian turned his gaze upward and saw that the dimension rift had become even darker. Half of a towering figure had already traveled across the dimension rift to descend upon this world. At this point in time, he was already certain that the deity was not Luo Ruoxin. The deity had an appearance resembling that of a young man. In terms of appearance, there was nothing that set him aside from ordinary humans. However, the aura that he emanated was deep and intense. Even without making any moves, his presence caused the space around him to shatter layer after layer. It was as if the world that they lived in was unable to withstand the weight of his existence. Sovereign Qinyong sent a telepathic message over to Zhang Xian. He's a Dimension Shatterer Realm expert. This is the prowess of a Dimension Shatterer Realm cultivator. Zhang Xian narrowed his eyes. The strength that the deity wielded was so powerful that this world was unable to assimilate his presence into it. If the world was an ocean, the deity was a droplet of oil. No matter how powerful the oceanic currents were, the droplet of oil would remain a transcendent being floating on the surface. Find authorized novels and web novel faster updates. Better experience, please click for visiting. Dimension Shatterer Realm experts are also known as Immortals Envoys. Back when Kong Shi was still around, someone prayed to a higher dimension in order to summon an Immortals Envoy onto this world. Who could have thought that history would repeat itself after so many years? It might be due to the emergence of the Temple of Confucius. What does the Temple of Confucius have to do with the descent of an Immortals Envoy? Rumor has it that the Temple of Confucius is located in a void that seals the passageway between the higher dimensions to our world. The emergence of the Temple of Confucius means that the stopper that prevents any higher beings from descending to our world has been released, thus allowing any Immortals Envoy to travel to our world. If that's the case, doesn't it mean that the power balance on the Master-Teacher continent is going to be reshuffled very soon? That might not necessarily be so. It isn't that easy for Immortals Envoys to descend onto our world. Not only will they have to pay a heavy price in the process, they must also suppress their cultivation to a very low level in order to avoid being ejected by our world. It's likely that they will only be able to utilize strength comparable to a Dimension Shatterer Realm primary stage cultivator. Of course, that's a strength to behold as well, but as long as we unite together to stand up against them, we should be able to stand our ground against them. Ancient Sage Allfire, Ancient Sage Mo Ling, and the other otherworldly demon lords swiftly communicated with one another. The deity who was descending upon their world was an Immortals Envoy from a higher dimension. If the deity chose to aid Sovereign Qinling, they would really be in great danger. Is this the strength that Luo Ruoxin wields too? Zhang Xian wondered as he assessed the descending deity intently with his eye of insight. The sight when Luo Ruoxin left played in his mind. She was an existence that could not be assimilated into the world as well. But there was a major difference between her and the deity that was descending to their world. It felt like the world had rejected Luo Ruoxin's existence more vehemently than it was rejecting the descending deity's presence. Did this mean that Luo Ruoxin's strength was even greater than that of the deity who was traversing over to their world? It took Sovereign Chunling a long while before he recovered from that slap. By the time he recollected himself, the energy lingering in the air had already been completely stored into the canvas of 4 seasons. Knowing that there was no reason to make a move anymore, he gritted his teeth and turned his attention to the deity in the sky. "Oh great deity, I am the real Sovereign Chunling. He's the fake." So as to not lose out, Zhang Xian quickly argued back. "I am the real one. He's the one who is a poor excuse of an imitation. How dare you even think of lying in the presence of a deity? You must be out of your mind." The effects of the disguise amulet far surpassed his imagination. Under its prowess, there was no physical difference that allowed one to distinguish him from Sovereign Chunling, such that it was likely that even the deity would be unable to tell the difference between them. Since he had already gone so far, he could try pushing on and see where it would take him. Honglong. The dimension rift jolted one last time. During their discussion, the deity had managed to traverse completely through the dimension rift. Floating in the air, he took a deep breath before opening his beady eyes. Kacha! Kacha! The eyes of the deity seemed to be reflected with lightning. A fear-inducing aura was swiftly diffusing outward, and it felt as if the sky would be shattered into pieces under the intensity of his aura. There was an unnatural vibe to the strength that he emanated, as if he was an anomalous existence that did not fit into the world. Even blood reincarnation realm experts would tremble frightfully before this might, let alone ordinary humans. A lower life form from a lower dimension actually thinks that he's able to fool me. How preposterous! The deity harumphed coldly as he turned his gaze upon the two of them. The next moment, Zhang Xian's entire body tensed up amid spasmodic convulsions. It was as if he was surrounded by countless terrifying primordial beasts, causing sweat to rain down his body. "I might not necessarily lose against him. There's no choice, I'll have to give it a shot." Given the combined prowess of him, the Dragonbone Divine Spear, Vicious, Ancient Sage Allfire, and Ancient Sage Emoling, even if the deity was a Dimension Shatterer realm expert, they might still stand a chance against him. Zhang Xian swiftly recovered from his tension to reveal a face devoid of emotions, making it impossible for one to peer into his mind. The gaze of the deity alternated between Zhang Xian and Sovereign Chunling, but a moment later, a slight frown appeared on his forehead. "You must have used your own blood essence when praying to the higher dimension. Offer your blood to me, and I'll discern the real from the fake." The deity had thought that, given his means and power, he would be able to see through the lies of this bunch of hillbillies. Contrary to his expectation, he was unable to find any loophole despite examining closely for such a long period of time. There was no physical difference between the two of them that allowed him to distinguish one from the other. However, there was no way that there could be 2 Sovereign Chunlings in the world. That being said, even though the imposter had disguised themselves impeccably when it came to physical traits, there was just no way they would be able to copy Sovereign Chunling's bloodline as well, right? Soon, 2 droplets of blood were sent the deity's way. The deity swiftly scanned the 2 droplets of blood with his spiritual perception, only to have the confident look on his face collapsing into confusion. To his disbelief, the 2 droplets of blood were actually identical to one another as well. What the heck was going on? "Oh great deity, this fellow has impersonated himself as me to make fun of you. We cannot allow such a gross act of disrespect go unpunished." Thinking that the deity might have found something out from their blood essence, Sovereign Chunling stood forward and spoke imposingly. "Shut your mouth." Pa. The deity threw a slap toward Sovereign Chunling once more, causing him to roll across the ground. The deity was still feeling a mixture of embarrassment and frustration at being unable to tell the two apart when Sovereign Chunling thoughtlessly butted in. It went without saying that this was an extremely foolish act. Holding his cheek indignantly, Sovereign Chunling lowered his head. The real Sovereign Chunling has offered many valuable artifacts in order to allow for my descent to this world. There's no way the fake will know what artifacts were used and the value of each of them. I want the two of you to write down a list of the artifacts used and their exact values. The one whose list is more accurate is bound to be the real Sovereign Chunling. The deity commanded. The ritual to summon a deity was extremely strict and pricey. If the artifacts that one offered did not meet a certain requirement, it could lead to a backlash instead. As such, the real Sovereign Chunling was bound to know the exact details of the offerings made to him. Sovereign Chunling was taken aback for a moment before slowly nodding. All right then. He took out a jade token and imprinted the values of all of the artifacts that he knew of onto it. Zhang Xian pondered for a moment before taking out a jade token to imprint what he knew on it too. To be honest, he was indeed unaware of the price that one had to pay in order to establish a window with a higher dimension. He had to admit that the deity was indeed extremely sharp, capturing the crux of the matter in an instant. However, back when he was disguised as appraiser Wu Tao, he had gone through all of the artifacts. Furthermore, as the souls of the living tributes had been pulled into the Stone of Divine Crusade, before being absorbed by him and his clone, he was well aware of the exact numbers and their cultivation realms. After a moment of contemplation, he jotted down the exact values and numbers onto the jade token. Taking the jade tokens from both Sovereign Chunling and Zhang Xian, the deity quickly scanned through the contents with his spiritual perception. A moment later, he turned to Sovereign Chunling with narrowed eyes gleaming with menace. Seeing that the deity's gaze was on him, Sovereign Chunling suddenly had a bad premonition. Deity, I'm the real Sovereign Chunling. However, before he could finish his words, the palm of the deity was already descending from the sky. How dare you lie to me? You must be sick of living. Hong Long. It was as if the world had collapsed onto Sovereign Chunling, causing his entire body to freeze on the spot. He could not even escape. A seemingly boundless power loomed above him like a guillotine, threatening to squash him into minced meat. No, not expecting that the deity whom he had paid such a heavy price to summon would actually try to kill him, Sovereign Chunling was horrified. With a furious roar, he drove his strength to his limits, causing his Jinqi to surge out. In the blink of an eye, his figure grew more than for visiting. Are you still not going to admit it? The deity narrowed his eyes as a terrifying surge of power revolved on his palm, ready to break forth and reduce Sovereign Chunling to dust at any moment. If that's what you have chosen to believe, there's nothing I can say in my defense. I can only say that the other party's ability to disguise himself is too outstanding. However, Sovereign Chunling took in a deep breath as a streak of madness flickered across his eyes. I am willing to offer my life up to you. I am willing to serve as your slave and heed your orders for life without the slightest complaint. As for him, Sovereign Chunling halted for a moment as he turned a chilling gaze in Zhang Xian's direction. Does he dare pledge the same? Right after saying those words, a droplet of blood essence flew forth from Sovereign Chunling's forehead toward the deity. As long as the deity accepted his blood essence, he would become no different from a contracted tamed beast. He would become a slave who would be at the beck and call of the deity. Even his life and death would no longer be in his control. This fellow, Zhang Xian's heart skipped a beat. No wonder he had said that Sovereign Chunyong was not as decisive as him, and that he would even forsake his own life. He had thought that Sovereign Chunling was referring to the ritual. But who could have known that the latter had already made up his mind to offer his entirety to the deity? That would explain why he was able to remain nonchalant about the deaths of the ancient sage in his faction as well. It turned out that his greatest trump card was the deity from the higher dimension. By relinquishing all of his freedom to the deity, Sovereign Chunling would earn the unreserved trust of the deity in return. As his master, there was no doubt that the deity would side with Sovereign Chunling to deal with the rest of them, and even mankind at large. Hula. The deity reached out and accepted the blood essence. The next instant, he grasped control over Sovereign Chunling's will and soul. With just a thought, he would be able to end Sovereign Chunling's life in an instant. After doing all of that, the deity turned his gaze toward Zhang Xian. His eyes no longer reflected calmness but coldness. Under the gaze of the deity, Zhang Xian felt his heart squeezing up a little. 2 Zhang equals 6. 66 M. You're the fake. The voice of the deity was resounding, similar to pieces of metal clanging with one another. His tone was impassive but absolute. Through Sovereign Chunling's thoughts, it was already apparent to the deity whom the fake was. As a being from a higher dimension, it was already a great embarrassment for him to have been played for a fool by someone from a lower dimension. If word spread, he could die of humiliation. There was no doubt that there was already a bundle of rage burning deep in his heart. It seems like I've been exposed. The very willingness of Sovereign Chunling to offer his soul up to the deity made a fundamental difference in their positions. This was something that Zhang Xian would never be willing to do. As such, it had also become the greatest opening to his disguise. With some awkward laughter, he raised his arm and charged forward. The Dragonbone Divine Spear flew into hands, and with a powerful thrust, he pierced the spear right toward the deity. Sla! The strength from Zhang Xian's body, Zhenqi, and soul was focused precisely at the very tip of the Dragonbone Divine Spear, imbuing it with the strength to shatter even space-time. This was an attack that would destroy even Sovereign Chunling in a heartbeat, skewering him mercilessly like a helpless deer. Since his disguise had failed him, he had to make the first move. If he could by any chance catch the deity off guard and kill him, that would be for the best. If he could not kill the deity, at the very least, he would still have the advantage from taking the initiative. Considering how the deity had taken Sovereign Chunling in as his subordinate, as well as the little regard that he had for the beings living in this world, it was likely that there was no room for reconciliation at all. Since that was the case, there was no need for Zhang Xian to play the good man. Puffed! Seeing Zhang Xian's move, the deity sneered coldly. He placed his hands behind his back, not bothering to dodge at all. Wang! Before the Dragonbone Divine Spear could pierce into his chest, it was swept away by another current of energy. It was like a wooden sword striking metal armor. It was completely ineffective. Zhang Xian was unable to push the spear any deeper in. Seeing such a sight, sweat erupted from Zhang Xian's every pore. He had known that the deity was a fearsome figure, but the latter's strength surpassed all of his expectations. The deity was actually able to ward against his attack, with just the basic Zhenqi protecting his body. Kacha! Kacha! Knowing that the situation was not in his favor, Zhang Xian hurriedly pulled out his spear as hard as he could, but the space in front of the deity's chest suddenly collapsed inward. Stuck in the midst of broken shards of space, he found himself unable to retract the Dragonbone Divine Spear no matter how he tugged. Following which, the voice of the Dragonbone Divine Spear echoed in his ears. Master, I'm injured. Zhang Xian hurriedly turned his gaze over, and saw some wear and tear on the tip of the Dragonbone Divine Spear. There were some cracks on the dragon's scales cloaking its surface, and it seemed like crimson blood was trickling out from the cracks. He's too powerful. How are we supposed to fight against such an opponent? If the deity was already so powerful without making an active move, would they not be obliterated the moment he made a move? He had thought that he would be peerless among the ancient sages now that he wielded the strength equivalent to a blood reincarnation realm cultivator, and had the Dragonbone Divine Spear in his grasp. However, it was obvious that he had been too optimistic. We have to make a move as well, or else all of us will die here. Seeing such a sight, Sovereign Qinyong immediately realized that if they did not make a move, they would be massacred like helpless lambs in a moment's time. Thus, he quickly drew his saber and charged forward. Find authorized novels and webnovel faster updates. Better experience, please click for visiting. At the same time, ancient sage Allfire raised his massive claws. Concentrated flames burst forth from his body, and it seemed as if he would set the entire world alit. Ancient sage Mo Ling and the others did not laze around either. They quickly rose into the air and made their moves in coordination with the rest. The group that was gathered there could already be considered the pinnacle fighting prowess of the entire otherworldly demonic tribe. Their might combined could impale even the heavens. Yet, in the face of this formidable might, the deity leisurely raised his hand and flicked his finger. Puh! A space-time turbulence immediately stormed ahead, sweeping all of the attacks away with it. In the blink of an eye, the devastating force created by the combined prowess of the group dissipated entirely, as if it had never existed at all. However, their interference did manage to buy some time for Zhang Xian to retract his spear and return to Sovereign Qinyang's side. Nevertheless, the absolute difference in their strengths was a huge blow to the group's morale. With such a powerful line-up, even the peak Sovereign Qinyang would have been killed in an instant, unable to retaliate at all. Yet, this deity had managed to stop them with just a simple flick of his finger. It was almost as if they were ants standing before a colossal giant. Was this the strength that a Dimension Shatter Realm cultivator wielded? It had really exceeded his wildest imagination. Not too bad. It seems like the lot of you aren't too worthless. The deity chuckled softly, but there was not the slightest emotion behind his words at all. He glanced down at the group below and said, "Just like him, submit to me, and I can spare your lives. Know that I have little patience for the likes of you, so make up your mind quick. You want us to submit to you? Dream on." Sovereign Qinyang spat contemptuously. As the highest leader of the otherworldly demonic tribe, he was obligated to ensure the welfare of his own tribesmen. If he was willing to bow down to a higher power in exchange for greater power, he would never have landed himself in such a state. "Oh, let me see how much those guts of yours are worth then," the deity uttered coldly before snapping his finger. There was not the slightest sound, and there was not any attack to be seen. Yet Sovereign Qinyang's face suddenly scrunched together in pain. Boom! A massive hole was created in his abdomen, and his figure whizzed through the air at a terrifying speed. Fresh blood continuously spurted from the punctured hole, raining crimson droplets upon the world. He had already been severely injured in the first place, and this strike left him in an even worse position. If not for the hatred and rage in his heart, he probably would not have even made it so far. He could feel his body approaching its limits, and it felt like all that was required was one last push for his body to come to a complete breakdown. The astonished Zhang Xian hurriedly flitted over to Sovereign Qinyang's side and infused the healing energy that he had put into the canvas of 4 seasons into the latter's body. However, to his horror, he realized that it was completely ineffective. As if trying to mix oil and water together, the healing energy simply refused to assimilate with Sovereign Qinyang's body. Sovereign Qinyang shook his head and explained weakly, "This energy is molded to suit Sovereign Chunling's constitution, so as to effectively heal his body. It won't work on anyone else. The only reason that you were able to absorb it is because the disguise amulet alters your body on a fundamental level, thus making you compatible with the energy as well." At the same time, he took out a pill and swallowed it. A moment later, his complexion finally alleviated slightly. The power bestowed by a deity could only be received by the person who had initiated the ritual. It was only because Zhang Xian was able to disguise his body on a fundamental level that he had been able to snatch the energy intended for Sovereign Qianling. But Sovereign Qinyang was unable to do the same. The spirit god had only helped him hide his aura, so as to conceal the fact that he was an otherworldly demon. He was a mere servant, so there was no way that the spirit god would bestow something as invaluable as the disguise amulet to him. This, Zhang Xian frowned. He stowed his painting away before turning his eyes back to the deity in the sky. The deity did not continue his assault after incapacitating Sovereign Qinyang. He simply gazed down loftily at the crowd below, as if a conqueror who had everyone's life and death in his grasp. It was clear that the deity did not even view Zhang Xian and the others as a threat to him. They were simply bugs whom he could crush at a whim, so their life and death was inconsequential to him. The deity turned to the rest of the crowd who had stood up against him earlier and asked, "What about the rest of you?" There was a moment of silence. A mixture of hesitation and fear rendered them unable to speak. Seeing that there was no response at all, the deity snapped his fingers once more. Pung pung pung. Ancient Sage All Fire, Ancient Sage Mo Ling. and the other ancient sages were sent flying simultaneously. The immense force made their faces blanch, and blood seeped from the corners of their lips. It takes nothing for me to kill the lot of you, and there's nothing you can possibly do that could affect me. This is absolute strength. We live in a world where the strong reign mighty, and the weak can either bow in submission or accept their death. There's no need for your little minds to think so hard. The situation is very clear. There are only two choices before you: death or subordination. Like I said, my patience is limited. I'll only give you one chance to choose. If you make the wrong decision, don't expect me to show you mercy. The deity placed his hands behind his back, as he spoke with the absolute authority of a tyrant. It was as if he would behead anyone who dared question him. Will you spare us as long as we submit to you? An ancient sage standing behind ancient sage Allfire asked meekly. Of course. Not only will I spare you, I'll even help you to unite the spirit tribe and place the entire master-teacher continent under your rule. You'll be in a position of unparalleled authority, standing above all beings except for me. The deity replied nonchalantly. Hearing those words, the face of the ancient sage swiftly flushed crimson in agitation. There was a moment of conflict as the concepts of freedom and power clashed in his mind. But it did not take long for him to make up his mind. Lowering his head, he kneeled down in servility and declared, "O great deity, I pledge to serve you with my life." The reason that he had chosen to help Sovereign Chunyong was as a favor. If he could help Sovereign Chunyong return to his original position, his standing in the spirit tribe would rise above the others. However, the appearance of the deity changed everything. With his life at stake, there was no reason for him to persist just for Sovereign Chunyong. Sovereign Chunling looked around him, and saw that Mo Ling, Allfire, and the other ancient sages had sealed the surrounding space. Knowing that there was no way that he would be able to escape, he exhaled deeply and said, "The winner takes it all. I have nothing to say now that I have lost." If he had won, the world would have been his. Since things had failed to go his way, the worst that could happen was death anyway. Back then, when he made the decision to turn against Sovereign Chunyong in the hope of becoming the next leader of the spirit tribe, he had known that such an outcome was possible. However, he had thought that there was no way that he could have accepted a loss, so he had gone to the extent of resolving himself to offer his soul up to a deity in order to ensure that he would be the last one standing. Yet, as he faced his defeat, he found himself feeling calmer than ever. Perhaps it was the realization that everything was really over that finally tamed his ambitious mind. "I know why you chose to turn against me." Hearing Sovereign Chunling's response, Sovereign Chunyong shook his head. Ever since the ancient times, the three sovereigns have always been headed by the lineage of Sovereign Chunling. However, ever since my grandfather's era, the lineage of Sovereign Chunling has been in decline. Your birth was viewed as the turning point of the lineage of Sovereign Chunling. Your exceptional talents caused your clan members to pin all of their hopes on you, and you wanted to meet their expectations. You set your mind to bringing the lineage of Sovereign Chunling back to its former glory, and you persevered toward that goal. But unfortunately you met me. You knew that you would have to overcome me for the lineage of Sovereign Chunling to rise to the top once more. So you pushed yourself to your limits. However, you never succeeded. That's why you had no choice but to resort to this. You thought that as long as I was out of the way, you'd be able to rise to the top and make the lineage of Sovereign Chunling the true leaders of the spirit tribe once more. However, this turned out to be the worst move that you have ever made. Sovereign Chunling sighed deeply in lamentation. Ever since ancient times, the entire spirit tribe had always been centered around the lineage of Sovereign Chunling. This was also why the lineage had been bestowed with the honor of carrying the Ling character in its name. However, the sudden appearance of Kong Shi in Mankind and Vicious in the spirit tribe had changed everything. The great war that had happened caused authority to be eventually amassed in the hands of the lineage of Sovereign Chunyong. As the ones who had been leading the spirit tribe for countless years, There was no way that the lineage of Sovereign Chen could accept such an outcome. Resentment had swiftly built up over the years, eventually resulting in such a series of events. Boom, boom, boom. As the final duel between the two sovereigns began, countless lacerations appeared in the sky. Amid the massive outpour of energy, one could vaguely see some hints of crimson blood dripping to the ground. The crowd watched with heavy hearts as Sovereign Qinyong's face turned paler and paler by the moment, as he pushed his tattered body beyond the limits. He had yet to recover from the grievous wounds that he had sustained from the encirclement of countless experts back at the Temple of Confucius, when he faced many more battles. And it had only been a moment ago, when he was struck squarely by the deity. It was no exaggeration to say that he was already dried up on the inside. It was really on sheer willpower that he was still standing. Sigh. Zhang Xian shook his head as he averted his gaze, unwilling to watch the duel any longer. Despite the close fight between the two experts, he was certain that Sovereign Chen Yong would emerge victorious and slay Sovereign Chen Ling with his own hands. A fight to the death between two equal experts eventually boiled down to a clash of willpower, and Sovereign Chen Yong's willpower was definitely greater. At that moment, Zhang Xian felt deeply conflicted inside. During his time with Sovereign Chen Yong, he had come to respect the latter as a person. Despite the grudges between mankind and the otherworldly demonic tribe, there was no question that Sovereign Chen Yong was an amazing figure. To be honest, he could not bear to see Sovereign Chen Yong meeting his end. However, to mankind, Sovereign Chen Yong's demise was probably the best outcome for them. Otherwise, as long as this linchpin holding the entire otherworldly demonic tribe survived, mankind would always remain in a perilous position. Sighing deeply, Zhang Xian turned his attention to the corpse on the ground. Just like Vicious Body, the corpse of the deity was astoundingly resilient, making it nigh impossible to leave any damage on it. Even though life had already receded from it, it continued to emanate a fearsome aura that kept ordinary humans away from it. Even Zhang Xian, who wielded powers equivalent to a blood reincarnation realm expert, still felt deeply pressured just by coming close to the corpse. After swiftly scanning the deity's body, Zhang Xian shook his head in disappointment. He had thought that there would be a lot of good items on the deity, given that he had come from a higher dimension. But who could have known that the latter would have nothing on him at all? In fact, there was not even a storage ring to be seen at all. It's probably because bringing one's possessions across dimensions is either impossible or extremely costly. Zhang Xian thought as he threw the corpse into his storage ring with a wave of his hand. While it was regrettable that there were no other treasures to be harvested, the body itself could already be considered as a precious treasure. The extent of Sovereign Chen Yong's injuries was horrifying. Not only were his foundations completely ruined, even his soul had started to dissipate as a result of the overwhelming traumas that he had sustained. When Sovereign Chen Yong decided to go against the two sovereigns and exact vengeance, he had never intended to continue living after dealing with them. Who could have thought that his young master would actually grant such a precious opportunity to him? If he had only acknowledged Zhang Xian, due to his relationship with the spirit god previously, at that very moment, he had really submitted to the other party at heart. Even though his young master was unreliable at times, and he would often disregard rules and conventions, he was a person who stood by his principles. No matter how difficult things got, that was one thing that he would never abandon. Perhaps this was where his true charm lay. It might be why his disciples and tamed beasts willingly devoted their lives to him. Teacher. Lu Yang clenched his fists tightly. If he had been in his teacher's position, he would never have given away the opportunity bestowed by the deity so easily to save the life of another. It seemed like there was still a huge gap between the two of them. It's an honor to have a master like this. Ancient Sage Allfire also nodded in agitation. What was most fearsome for a tamed beast was for it to have entrusted their life into the hands of someone who cared not for their well-being. But along the way, his master had been shown to be extremely thoughtful and considerate, and he had never forced him to do anything against his will after that either. He would willingly give up his life for such a master. The same thoughts surfaced in ancient sage Emoling's mind as well. Everyone who witnessed the scene had some thoughts of their own, and complex emotions rippled in their eyes. Young master, there's no reason to save me. Don't waste such a precious opportunity on me. Sovereign Chunyong struggled to shake his head. He knew how invaluable the favor of a cultivator could be. If Zhang Xian just asked for power, he might even be able to achieve an immediate breakthrough to the Dimension Shatter realm. It was a waste to use this precious opportunity on a dying person like him. I can decide for myself whether this is worth it or not, Zhang Xian said before turning to the silhouette in the sky. How about it? Since the spirit god has asked you to help me, surely you won't turn down my request, right? The silhouette lowered her gaze to look at Sovereign Chunyong before asking with a deep frown. Are you sure this is your request? I am certain. Zhang Xian nodded. Very well then. The silhouette pondered for a brief moment before continuing. His life force has been severely depleted, such that it's impossible for him to survive in this energy-deficient world anymore. His only chance is for me to take him to the Azure. However, I'll suffer the backlash of the laws of this world if I attempt to breach the dimension barrier and bring someone over. I'll bring his soul over and try to mend it, but there's nothing I can do about his body. That's fine by me. Zhang Xian heaved a sigh of relief. As a soul oracle, he knew that the foundation of life lay within the soul. As long as the soul remained existent, it would just take a bit of effort to construct a suitable body for one. All right then. The silhouette lowered her hand and grasped lightly. The next moment, Sovereign Chunyong's head crooked to one side as he breathed his last breath. However, his soul appeared in the grasp of the silhouette before being swiftly sealed by a unique surge of energy. Boom! After that was done, the silhouette slowly rose back into the dimension rift as she faded more and more. She was going to breach the dimension barrier and return to her world. All of a sudden, she stopped for a moment and said, I finally understand why the spirit god feels so deeply for you. However, your journey to seek her will be fraught with difficulties. I hope that you can persist regardless of the hardship you face. After saying her piece, her silhouette dissipated on the spot, vanishing without a trace together with Sovereign Chunyong's soul. I will. Looking at the slight traces of light lingering in the area, Zhang Xian clenched his fists. The light finally scattered entirely, signaling the end of the ritual. Zhang Xian stood quietly on the spot in a melancholic mood. Even though he had failed to receive exact news regarding Luo Ruoxin, he had come to understand that the journey that he had to walk together with her was fraught with many difficulties. And the very first trial for him was to achieve a breakthrough to the Dimension Shatterer realm. Only when he reached that level would he have a chance to ascend to a higher dimension and seek his loved one. Master, Guild Leader, Ancient Sage Allfire and Ancient Sage Emoling rushed over and called out. Zhang Xian turned around to look at the two of them. The three sovereigns of the otherworldly demonic tribe have been eliminated, thus leaving them without a leader at the moment. Even though Yang Lu has been acknowledged as the successor of Sovereign Chunyong, in terms of experience and cultivation, he's still far lacking at the moment. Why don't we just... Ancient Sage Emoling suggested as killing intent flashed across his eyes. For many generations, their sole oracle guild had lived among the otherworldly demons, enduring hardship and humiliation, so that they would be able to eliminate them one day. At that very moment, the opportunity had been delivered to their hands. With their guild leader's capabilities, he should be able to overthrow Yang Lu and easily take his place. Hearing the words of those two, Zhang Xian shook his head and chuckled softly before calling out, Lu Yang! Lu Yang immediately rushed up to Zhang Xian and kneeled on the floor. Disciple Lu Yang pays respect to Zhang Laoshe. Disciple, Zhang Laoshe? The two ancient sages glanced at one another in bewilderment. They could not understand what was going on. When did Zhang Xian take in that newly appointed sovereign Chen Yong as his disciple? I am Zhang Laosher's direct disciple. I have been under his tutelage since a year ago. Lu Yang explained with a smile, as he drove his cultivation technique back to normal. Gradually, the killing intent on him vanished, and his height also diminished as well. It did not take him long to return to his original appearance. Why you? You are a human? Ancient sage Mo Ling widened his eyes in disbelief. That's right. Lu Yang nodded. There were no outsiders there, so there was no need for him to hide the truth. Ancient sage Mo Ling and ancient sage Allfire were flabbergasted by this abrupt turn of events. Sovereign Chen Yong was a wary man, and he had never allowed any spies to get to his side. The lineage of soul oracles had managed to infiltrate the ranks of the other two sovereigns over the years, but none of them had ever gotten close to Sovereign Chen Yong. Yet, who could have known that the successor whom Sovereign Chen Yong found in his later years would actually be Zhang Xian's direct disciple? Did this not mean that the otherworldly demonic tribe was already effectively under their control? All right, I believe none of you should have any objections anymore. Lu Yang has just been appointed as Sovereign Chen Yong, so there's bound to be many voices opposing his leadership. Thus, I need the two of you to support him for the time being. Quell the voices of all opposing Lu Yang's rule within a month, and unite the otherworldly demonic tribe. He should be the one and only leader of the otherworldly demonic tribe. Zhang Xian instructed firmly. While Sovereign Chen Ling and Sovereign Chen Xing had been killed, they still had many subordinates under them. Furthermore, the lords of the otherworldly demonic tribe wielded considerable power in their jurisdiction. Given that Lu Yang had just accepted Sovereign Chen Yong's heritage and had not gained stable footing yet, he would require the support of those two blood reincarnation realm experts in order to build his prestige and reputation. With their assistance, there should be no one in the otherworldly demonic tribe who would be able to stand against Lu Yang. Soon enough, Lu Yang would become the one and only sovereign of the otherworldly demonic tribe. Find authorized novels and webnovel faster updates. Better experience, please click for visiting. Rest assured, we'll surely give our full support to young Master Lu Yang in uniting the otherworldly demonic tribe. Ancient Sage Mo Ling and Ancient Sage Allfire nodded in agreement. Alright, let's go. I need to go into seclusion for a moment. Come and look for me after you have calmed down the rebels and united the otherworldly demonic tribe as one. Zhang Xian said with a wave of his hand. The crowd nodded in agreement. Uniting the individual factions of the three sovereigns was no easy task, but with their feat of having slain a deity, as well as Sovereign Chen Yong's dying will, they had legitimacy on their side. It should not be too difficult for Lu Yang to garner the support of the general populace. Watching as the crowd left, Zhang Xian sat quietly on the spot for quite a while before entering the myriad anthive nest. Now that he finally had some time on his hand, it would be a good opportunity for him to try refining the corpse of the deity into a soulless metal humanoid. At the same time, he would give the legs and the feet that he had just obtained from Sovereign Chen Xing to Vicious for him to assimilate. Perhaps, by observing Vicious' recovery, he might be able to figure out a way to achieve a breakthrough to the Dimension Shatter realm. With his mind drifting amid the massive corpse, Zhang Xian's state of mind grew more and more stable. At the same time, his soul was becoming increasingly harmonized with his consciousness. This was already the 20th day since he had started refining the deity's corpse. When he first took the deity's corpse out, putting aside refining it, it had been hard for his soul to even approach it. However, after many days of hard work, his soul was finally able to move freely around the deity's corpse, allowing him to gain full control over it. Dimension Shatter Realm cultivators are indeed formidable. There's a fundamental difference in their fundamental constitution from that of other ancient sages. In his many days of observation, Zhang Xian had learned that the bulk of a Dimension Shatter Realm expert's prowess originated not from their superior concentration of Jinqi or powerful soul, but their formidable physical body. It was due to their physical body that they were able to travel through voids in space without sustaining any damage. As a cultivator who had practiced the Heaven's Path Golden Body, The resilience of Zhang Xian's body was comparable to that of ancient sage artifacts. However, there was still a huge gap compared to the body of the deity. During the previous battle, he had been shocked at how the Dragonbone Divine Spear was unable to breach the deity's basic Xinqi defense. However, after studying the deity's corpse, he realized that even if he had breached the deity's basic Xinqi defense, he would not have been able to pierce through the other party's physical body. In other words, there was no way that he would have been able to inflict any damage on the other party. It was fortunate that he had kept hold of a golden page, which had allowed him to turn the situation around during that crucial moment. Otherwise, things would have ended very differently. The meridians of the deity's body actually bear some resemblance to mine. Another observation that Zhang Xian had made was that the meridian network in the deity's body was much more logical than other cultivators in this world. It was actually very similar to the meridians in his body after he had altered them. Such a meridian network allowed one to drive Xinqi much swifter than usual, which in turn brought about greater fighting prowess for an individual. The final step: assimilation. Another 7 days passed. Knowing that the time was ripe, Zhang Xian began preparing himself for the final step. Honglong. Zhang Xian moved his soul into the corpse's body and destroyed all of the remaining instinctive defensive mechanisms in it one by one. Hula. The massive corpse slowly opened its eyes. Zhang Xian tried to control it a little, and the next moment, he felt boundless strength pouring forth from him. Even a blood reincarnation realm consummation expert would die from a single punch from this. Zhang Xian could hardly curb his excitement. Find authorized novels and web novel faster updates. Better experience, please click for visiting. He had yet to push for a breakthrough to ancient sage, opting to suppress his cultivation at sempiternal realm consummation instead. For a sempiternal realm consummation expert to be able to kill a blood reincarnation realm consummation expert in a single punch, there was probably no one who would dare believe such a thing to be possible. After spending some time relishing in the immense strength provided by the corpse, Zhang Xian reluctantly pulled himself out from the corpse and returned to his physical body. This will be my greatest trump card from this moment on, Zhang Xian murmured excitedly. With this, he had nothing to fear anymore. Master, I have already assimilated my legs and feet. My current strength is only a step away from reaching the Dimension Shatter realm. With the right impetus, I should be able to achieve a breakthrough right away. Vicious said. After entering the myriad ant-hive space, he had given the legs and feet to Vicious. Over the past month, Vicious had managed to assimilate them entirely, and his cultivation had also risen beyond the level of ordinary blood reincarnation realm consummation cultivators. I have 10 bottles of blood from blood reincarnation realm otherworldly demons. Absorb them together with the straw garment, and you should be able to regenerate your flesh and push for a breakthrough to the Dimension Shatterer realm. Zhang Xian said as he passed a couple of jade bottles over. Fortunately, he had collected plenty of ancient sage blood in the previous few battles. It should be sufficient for Vicious to make a full recovery. Thank you, Master, Vicious said in gratitude as he took the jade bottles. He had intended to assimilate the straw garment a long time ago, but he had found that he was lacking sufficient energy to fully recover his body, so he had chosen to put it off for the time being. With everything in place now, he could finally attempt a complete recovery once and for all. After passing the jade bottles to Vicious, Zhang Xian left the other party alone. This was not something that he could help with. The other party had to figure out how he could recover by himself. Sitting on the floor, Zhang Xian began to ruminate over his recent gains. Slowly, his aura began to become more and more elusive, transforming from a sharp edge to something simple and unimpressive. At that very moment, even blood reincarnation realm experts would have trouble seeing through his true strength. All in all, factoring in my physical body, Xinqi's soul and my clone, I have undergone 4 ancient sage ordeals in total. If I wish to achieve another breakthrough, I'll have to make a significant advancement in a certain law of the world, or comprehend a skill surpassing that of the Heaven's Path techniques. It was because Zhang Xian's physical body, Xinqi, and soul cultivation had all reached a level comparable to an ancient sage, that he could brandish strength comparable to blood reincarnation realm cultivators, despite being only at the sempiternal realm. However, none of that was enough for him. He had chosen not to achieve a breakthrough, because he wanted to surpass the heavens in the comprehension of one of the laws. He knew that this was the only way that he could surpass Kong Shi's accomplishments and reach the very pinnacle of mankind. He would require at least that much if he wanted to reach Luo Ruoxin. But how can I create a skill that surpasses the Heaven's Path techniques? Zhang Xian shook his head in distress. The only way that he could surpass the Heaven's Path techniques was for him to first uncover his own path. Despite his unparalleled talent that allowed him to master any technique in an instant, it was no easy feat for him to create something significant of his own, not to mention that he was aiming to surpass the very top. He ruminated over the issue for several days, but nothing came to his mind at all. Eventually, he had no choice but to leave the myriad ant-hive nest and return to the peak of the thousand-leaf mountain in disappointment. Thinking back, more than a month has already passed. I wonder how Lu Yang and the others are faring at the moment. After spending more than a month in cultivation, Zhang Xian felt as if his body had gotten a little rusty. He was just about to go and check on how his student was doing after taking over the title of Sovereign Chun Yong, when he suddenly noticed a shockwave not too far away, following which, two figures swiftly flitted in his direction. It was none other than ancient sage Mo Ling and ancient sage Allfire. Over the past month, they had made significant advancements in their cultivation. However, what was most notable about them was the overpowering scent of death flowing from them. With just a glance, it was apparent that they had claimed many lives over the past month. We pay our respects. The man and the beast kneeled down deferentially and paid their respects. How is it? Zhang Xian got straight to the point. The young master has already successfully quelled the unrest of the otherworldly demonic tribe. Today is the day of that he'll officially succeed the position of Sovereign Chun Yong. Ancient Sage Allfire said. The otherworldly demon lords from various places have also come to the capital to witness the young master's inauguration ceremony. Guild leader, do you want to head over to take a look too? Ancient Sage Mo Ling asked expectantly. Inauguration ceremony? Very well. Zhang Xian nodded in satisfaction. It seemed like Lu Yang had truly grown up. His direct disciple was much more rational in dealing with matters than he thought. While there was no denying that Lu Yang had Sovereign Chun Yong's mandate, and he had also received the latter's cultivation impartation, his young age and insufficient cultivation were bound to have caused some dissatisfaction among the top brass of the otherworldly demonic tribe. There was no way that they were going to easily submit to a young brat who had not proven himself. Thus, if he had rushed into conducting the inauguration ceremony, not only would he have been unable to rally others to his side, it might even have ended up as a farce, thus diminishing his authority. However, after quelling the unrest and ensuring that no one dared to challenge his authority anymore, Lu Yang's inauguration would serve as the impetus to truly unite the otherworldly demonic tribe. As the only sovereign remaining, the entire otherworldly demonic tribe would naturally converge around him. With such huge rallying power, no one would dare oppose him. As Lu Yang's teacher, there's no way I could miss the inauguration ceremony that pronounces his position as the sole leader of the otherworldly demonic tribe. Let's go. Zhang Xian said with a smile. Lu Yang had always suffered from low self-esteem, thinking that he was inferior to his seniors and juniors. However, he had eventually broken out of his shell and achieved something significant. As his teacher, Zhang Xian was more than proud of him. Of course, it went without saying that he had to go there in person to witness his student's glory. That day, the royalty and nobles of the otherworldly demonic tribe were gathered in the capital, all for the purpose of commemorating the inauguration of the next sovereign Chun Yong. The streets of the massive city were bustling, bringing an unprecedented vibrancy to the area. From time to time, there would be an unfathomable expert walking across the wide streets that left any Saint Nine Dan cultivators present trembling in fear. These were the great sages of the otherworldly demonic tribe. Experts of that caliber usually dominated large swathes of land, with none daring to oppose their domination. Yet in the capital, they dared not act out of line. The newly appointed sovereign Chen Yong had quelled all opposition against him and united the otherworldly demonic tribe as one. All of the major powers and top experts had submitted to him. If anyone dared cause any trouble, who could know if the person standing right next to them would be a widely feared ancient sage who had already submitted to the new sovereign Chen Yong? The newly appointed sovereign Chen Yong is truly a formidable figure, unprecedented in the history of our spirit tribe. Back then, Sovereign Chen Ling and Sovereign Chen Yong colluded with the humans to injure the old Sovereign Chen Yong. In order to avenge his predecessor, he stood forward and confronted the two of them. Not only did he manage to unravel their scheme, he even destroyed a deity from a higher dimension with a single move, thus giving rise to his reputation of invincibility. On the streets, a storyteller waved the fan in his hand as he described the exploits of the new Sovereign Chen Yong with vivid gestures. Wait a moment, there seems to be something wrong with your story, isn't there? I was present during the major battle here in the capital a month ago, and I saw with my own eyes that the new Sovereign Chen Yong was only a great sage back then. There's no way that he could have interfered in a battle of that caliber back then. It was an unknown ancient sage who stood in and killed the deity. A passerby challenged the storyteller. It had only been a month since that major battle, and many in the capital had witnessed the sight with their own eyes. What they had seen varied vastly from what the storyteller had illustrated. The former had been singing praises of the new sovereign Chen Yong's accomplishments, but everyone who had spectated the battle knew that the person who had stood out the most during the battle was not the new sovereign Chen Yong, but an ancient sage whom no one had ever seen before. Seeing that he had been challenged by one of the listeners, the storyteller asked with a smile, "Do you know who that unknown ancient sage is then?" I'm afraid that I don't really know," the passerby replied with a shake of his head. The other listeners also had slightly confused expressions on their faces. That man never said his name. In fact, he has not appeared since that day. Could it be that you know who that person is? One of the listeners asked. Upon hearing those words, the crowd's ears perked up. The entire capital was filled with curiosity as to who that mysterious expert was. There was an itch in their hearts that would not be relieved until they finally knew the background of that mysterious expert. Of course I know. Seeing that he had managed to hook everyone's appetite, the storyteller chuckled softly as he stroked his beard gleefully. He tapped on the copper pot in front of him with his finger rhythmically, as if hinting something. "Tell us." A slightly plump figure wearing a veil flicked his wrist and tossed a couple of great Yong coins into the copper pot, producing a resounding ring. Seeing that there was some money, the eyes of the storyteller lit up. He quickly slipped the great Yong coins into his sleeves before leaning in to explain with a lowered voice. "It's said that the mysterious ancient sage is Sovereign Chen Yong's mentor. He's an expert who had long gone into seclusion. It was under his tutelage that the new Sovereign Chen Yong was able to achieve the spectacular feat of uniting the entire spirit tribe despite his young age. Not only so, it's said that the mysterious ancient sage even tamed ancient sage Allfire and made ancient sage Imo Ling submit to him. That is also why the two of them are so devoted to protecting the new Sovereign Chen Yong." "Sovereign Chen Yong's teacher? Are you sure you know what you're talking about?" "The new Sovereign Chen Yong has received the heritage of the old Sovereign Chen Yong. So shouldn't his mentor be the old Sovereign Chen Yong?" Some of the listeners expressed their doubts toward the words of the storyteller. Of course not. The old Sovereign Chen Yong is indeed formidable. There's no denying that. However, he isn't qualified to become Sovereign Chen Yong's teacher yet. In fact, I even heard that the old Sovereign Chen Yong even has to bow respectfully and address that person as young master. The storyteller refuted. Even the old Sovereign Chen Yong calls him young master? Aren't you getting a little too overboard with your bragging? Or do you mean to say that the mysterious ancient sage is actually a deity too?" The plump figure wearing a veil scoffed. "Of course he's a deity. If he isn't a deity, how could he have killed the other deity that has come from a higher dimension so easily?" The storyteller replied matter-of-factly. "For the past tens of thousands of years, other than our spirit tribe's vicious and mankind's Kong Shi. Have you heard of anyone who wielded such power? Everyone was rendered speechless. Deity. Just the name itself was a symbol of invincibility. In the entire history of the Master-Teacher continent, there were only 2 individuals who had managed to kill a deity. Yet, an ancient sage had suddenly appeared in this era and easily killed a deity. It was hard to believe that the other party was not a deity himself. It's because the new sovereign Chen Yong is a direct disciple of a deity that he has been able to unite our great spirit tribe together. It's a mandate from the heavens. The gods are favoring our spirit tribe. With such a leader, our spirit tribe will only rise higher and higher. The storyteller became more and more zealous with each word. Indeed, it's an honor to be able to live in the same era as the new sovereign Chen Yong. A future of prosperity and greatness awaits our spirit tribe. This is our generation, our era. The crowd trembled in agitation upon hearing those words. Humph! What bullshit you are spouting! I say that you are intentionally crafting stories to beguile the hearts of others, so as to rally them under the flag of. The plump man harumphed coldly, but halfway through his words, he suddenly felt someone tugging on his clothes. With a deep frown, he turned around, only to find himself faced with a tall and slender young lady dressed in humble wear. Let's return. Taken aback, the plump man quickly stuffed the final piece of meat into his mouth, before reasoning with the young lady. What? Wait a moment. I came here to gather information, not to eat. Just give me a while more. What he was faced with was the icy voice of the young lady. Senior told me to call you back. If you don't want to head back, you can remain here for all eternity. The plump man shuddered a little fearfully before hurriedly laughing it off. Ha ha ha, what are you saying? How would I possibly dare to go against Senior's orders? Let's head over right now. It would be terrible to keep Senior waiting. Thus, the 2 of them took their leave. Under the lead of the young lady, they maneuvered through various alleys before finally arriving at a small courtyard. The young lady pushed the door to the courtyard open and walked in. A little further from the entrance was a tightly sealed room. This room had been sealed using many unique means, such that it would be impossible for any sound or spiritual perception to enter or leave the room. There were several people sat within the room. From their appearances, they were not otherworldly demons but humans. Faced with the disapproving frown from the young lady seated at the middle of the room, the plump man scratched his head in embarrassment and explained, Hee, I just went out to gather some intelligence. What intelligence have you gathered so far? Share it with us. A young man seated by the side asked with a smile. Behind him was a spear reflecting a cold glint leaning diagonally against the wall. Well, it seems like the newly appointed sovereign Chen Yong is truly a shrewd individual. Not only did he manage to take down all of his opposition, he even dispatched storytellers all over the capital to spread the news that he has the mandate of the heavens. At this very moment, pretty much everyone in the capital believes that he's someone chosen by the heavens to lead the otherworldly demonic tribe to greatness. The plump man said after pondering for a moment, I have heard of this matter as well. The new sovereign Chen Yong is an extremely astute person. Under his lead, the otherworldly demonic tribe will surely grow more and more powerful. This will indubitably place mankind in a perilous position, the young man said with a frown. He turned to the young lady in the center and asked, Senior, what are your current thoughts? Find authorized novels and web novel faster updates. Better experience, please click for visiting. Given that the new sovereign Chen Yong is just about to be inaugurated, he definitely needs all kinds of publicity in order to win the loyalty of the entire otherworldly demonic tribe. It's within our expectations for him to be spreading news like that. The young lady tapped her finger lightly on the table. However, just as Zhang Yang has said, the unification of the spirit tribe doesn't bode well for mankind. Thus, we have to make the first move. If we can assassinate him during the inauguration ceremony, we can spread chaos and discord among the otherworldly demonic tribe and return them to the pile of scattered sand that they were. Assassinate. Everyone's face immediately turned grim. Making a move on the new sovereign Chen Yong during the inauguration ceremony was practically a recipe for certain death. All of the strongest experts of the otherworldly demonic tribe were gathered there. And if things went wrong, all of them could end up dead. Do we have to do it during the inauguration ceremony? The plump man asked in incomprehension. Wouldn't our chances at victory be higher if we were to assault him at some other occasion? There was no doubt that the defenses around the new sovereign Chunyong would be extremely tight during the inauguration ceremony. Was it really suitable for them to do it at that moment? There are 3 benefits to it. The person who spoke then was not the young lady seated at the center, but the other one who had brought the plump man over. Firstly, the inauguration ceremony is one of the grandest celebrations of the otherworldly demonic tribe. If our assassination succeeds, all those rumors about the mandate of the heavens would be swiftly unraveled. This will cause the otherworldly demons, who have just been rallied together, to swiftly disperse. It will also make it much harder for anyone to unite the otherworldly demonic tribe once more. The plump man nodded in agreement. If the new sovereign Chunyong was killed shortly after all of the rumors about how he had the mandate of the heavens and so on, the effects would indeed be the most pronounced. Fear and panic would swiftly spread throughout the crowd, making the otherworldly demonic tribe weaker than ever. Secondly, for the past tens of thousands of years, the otherworldly demonic tribe has been under the shared leadership of the 3 sovereigns. However, all of a sudden, it has turned into a one-man show, while the new sovereign Chunyong has crushed all of the opposition thus far. And no one dares to oppose him due to the overwhelming strength that he wields. The problem is that he still lacks legitimacy. Not everyone will accept his rule. That's also why he sent storytellers all around the capital to spread the word that he has the mandate of the heavens. The young lady explained. The reason that they are causing such a huge commotion right now is out of fear that the new sovereign Chunyong will be unable to gain the support of the populace. As such, this might be our best chance to strike. Our best chance to strike? The plump man was unable to comprehend the leap in logic. Those who are opposed to sovereign Chunyong's rule will surely be watching the inauguration ceremony as well. If they see someone make a move against the inaugurated sovereign Chunyong, there's a good chance that they will be incited to create more chaos. If so, it will be much easier for us to succeed than if we conduct a surprise assault. The young lady explained. The plump man fell into deep thought. In terms of understanding the minds of others, he was nowhere near those 2 young ladies. If they factored that into the equation as well, their chances of success during the inauguration ceremony could very well be much higher. The factions built up by Sovereign Chen Ling and Sovereign Chen Xing would not simply vanish just with the deaths of the 2 of them. Even if the new sovereign Chunyong had forced the members of those 2 factions to submit to him with force, there was a good chance that they would still view the new sovereign Chunyong with hostility. Thus, if someone attempted an assassination on the new sovereign Chunyong right before them, they might just be more than willing to lend a hand. I'll share the 3rd point, the young lady sitting at the center of the room said. I caught sight of ancient sage Mo Ling and ancient sage Allfire hurriedly leaving the capital earlier this morning. The 2 of them are the strongest experts aiding the new sovereign Chunyong at the moment, and as long as they aren't around, our chances of success are fairly high. Those 2 old farts actually left prior to the inauguration ceremony? Aren't they the protectors of the new sovereign Chunyong? How could they leave at such a crucial moment? The plump man wondered in bewilderment. I'm not too certain about the exact reason either, but the chances are that they have left the area to quell some other rebellion, so as to ensure that nothing goes wrong during the inauguration, the young lady replied. Furthermore, based on my investigations, it seems like there's a segment during the inauguration ceremony that requires the new sovereign Chunyong to pay respects to his predecessors. During the process, the new sovereign Chunyong must humbly listen to the teachings of his predecessor, so he cannot utilize his spiritual perception or Jinqi at all. In other words, this is an ideal opportunity for us to strike. As long as we plan things out well, we do stand a decent chance at success. Hearing the analysis, the plump man nodded and replied, Since that's the case, I'll follow your plan, senior. Good. Since we have come to a consensus, let's prepare ourselves. As she spoke, the young lady seated in the center stood up. She looked at the 5 faces before her and said, "I know what all of you are thinking. A while ago, our teacher was forced by the 100 schools of philosophers to end his life in the Master Teacher Pavilion headquarters due to his association with the spirit god. We know that it's just a concealment for him to sneak into the otherworldly demonic tribe, but his injuries are simply so severe that it's impossible for him to have recovered in such a short period. However, with the inauguration of the new sovereign Chen Yong, the unification of the otherworldly demonic tribe is lying just around the corner. We don't have time to look for our teacher anymore. Right now, what we have to do is kill the new sovereign Chen Yong in the shortest time possible to eliminate this potential threat. This is the only way we can cleanse our teacher of his dishonor, to let the Master Teacher Pavilion and the entire world know that our teacher has always been with mankind, and that has never changed at all. At the same time, only as our reputation grows will our teacher be able to find us more easily. Since they did not know where their teacher was, they would just have to stand at the most brilliant place possible, so that their teacher would be able to find them. We understand, the others replied in unison. The group that was gathered in the room consisted of none other than Zhang Xian's 6 direct disciples: Zhaoye, Wang Ying, Zheng Yang, Wei Ruyan, Yuan Tao, and Lu Chong. Find authorized novels and webnovel faster updates. Better experience, please click for visiting. It had been 2 months since their teacher ended his life at the Master Teacher Pavilion headquarters. Fearing that something would happen to their teacher, a month ago, just like most other cultivators, they had descended into a subterranean gallery and launched an extensive search. However, they had still been unable to gather any news regarding their teacher despite their best efforts. However, the investigation did bring the recent changes in the otherworldly demonic tribe to their attention. They had noticed the threat that was brewing in the otherworldly battlefield and realized that it could be too late if they did not make a move to curb the threat swiftly. Thus, they had chosen to gather in the capital to discuss a countermeasure. Since we have a common understanding over here, let's swiftly share our current cultivation realms. Zhaoye said, "Ever since our teacher departed, Zheng Yang has been spending his time cultivating in the Hall of Spring and Autumn, and he has already reached Ancient Sage 1 Dan Bloodline Continuance Realm Consummation. In terms of fighting prowess, he should be on par with most great Philosopher Realm cultivators. There should be nothing wrong with my information, right?" "That's right," Zheng Yang replied. When he heard that his teacher had ended his life in the Master Teacher Pavilion headquarters, while he knew that it was just a cover, the thought of the humiliation that his teacher had to bear had nearly driven him crazy. Thus, he had locked himself in the Hall of Spring and Autumn and cultivated frenziedly. Due to his hard work and his various fortuitous encounters in the Temple of Confucius, he actually managed to achieve a breakthrough to Ancient Sage, following which, he spent almost a year within the Hall of Spring and Autumn reinforcing his cultivation, causing his cultivation to rise to Bloodline Continuance Realm Consummation. Even though he was still only at Ancient Sage 1 Dan, due to his superior cultivation techniques and battle techniques, his fighting prowess would not lose out to the average Ancient Sage 2 Dan Great Philosopher Realm cultivator. "Zheng Yang, you and I will be the vanguard for the operation," Zhaoye said. She then turned her gaze to the other young lady, sitting by the other side. "Ruyan, you have also achieved a breakthrough to Ancient Sage, right? While you aren't as powerful as Lu Chong yet, your mastery of poison makes you a frightening opponent. Even great Philosopher Realm cultivators could die to your poison if they are caught unaware." The young lady whom Zhaoye was addressing had remained extremely quiet throughout the entire conversation. She was none other than the disciple that possessed the innate poison body and poison soul constitution, Wei Ruyan. Despite her silence, everyone knew that she was likely to be the most terrifying of them all in a real battle. I'll try to tie down the others to prevent them from supporting Sovereign Chen Yong. If any of them dare approach, my poison shall corrode them inside out. If I need to, I'll even massacre the entire city," Wei Ruyan remarked nonchalantly. Even when she spoke of massacring the entire city, there was not the slightest change in her facial expression. It was almost as if she was speaking of crushing an ant. Back in the Temple of Confucius, she had received her teacher's heritage and the Bodhi fruit, which had allowed her to achieve a breakthrough in her state of mind. Together with her fortuitous encounter back then, she had successfully pushed for a breakthrough to ancient sage a month ago. While she was slightly beneath Zheng Yang in terms of offensive ability, there was no doubt that her poison was an invaluable asset when it came to dealing with multiple enemies simultaneously. Anyone who dared charge into the area of attack would simply succumb to her poison. This would render the numerical advantage of the new sovereign Chen Yang's forces absolutely meaningless. Alright, I'll be counting on you for that. As for Yuan Tao, we'll be relying on you for defense. When will your second ancient sage ordeal come? Zhaoye turned to look at the plump man, with a slight frown on her forehead. Yuan Tao had already challenged the ancient sage ordeal once at the Temple of Confucius, but he had forcefully suppressed it. Till now, his second ancient sage ordeal had yet to come. In other words, despite his incredible potential, he had yet to reach ancient sage. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.